Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le sénateur Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le sénateur Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le sénateur Ferguson. Monsieur le sénateur Lefondre.
Présent.
Madame le sénateur Valois.
Présente.
Madame le sénateur Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le sénateur Pallet. Monsieur le sénateur Mezek. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Madame le député Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Madame le député de Grouville. Monsieur le député Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Higgins.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Masson.
Présent.
Madame le député Pinel.
Présente.
Monsieur le député de Saint-Martin. Monsieur le député de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublay.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Labbé. Monsieur le député Wickenden. Monsieur le député de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Young.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le député de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le député de la Trinité. Monsieur le député de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le député Lehegara. Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Madame le député Pershaw.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves. Monsieur le député Pamplin.
Présent.
Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi les gouvernements et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussis sur bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il de plus que mettre à le soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en descend. Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame le sénateur Ferguson.
Excusez.
Monsieur le sénateur Pallet.
Présent.
Monsieur le sénateur Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Défaut.
Madame le député de Grouville.
Défaut.
Monsieur le député Tadier. Monsieur le député Wickenden.
Défaut.
Monsieur le député de la Trinité.
Défaut.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Sir, I'm terribly sorry. I should have mentioned that the Constable of Grouville is, the Deputy of Grouville is at a funeral this morning and will be joining us later. I'm sorry I missed the right opportunity to
Members
say
agree
that.
the deputy should be excused? Excusez.
Sir, may we raise the defo on the Constable of St Mary, please?
By Whisker, yes, definitely. Les États sont constitués. Before moving on with public business, we have two, or three, I should say, very distinguished visitors in the chamber with us this morning. We have Monsieur Gilbert Chaudoge, who's the maire adjoint de Banville-Carteret. We have Monsieur Jacques Hébé, who is conseiller du commerce extérieur la France, and Madame Isabelle Bouillet-Moupard, vice-présidente of the Maison de la Normandie La Manche and councillor of the La Manche County in charge of the external relations. And perhaps members would welcome them in the usual way. Very well. We now continue with the debate on P63. I remind members after this debate is over, there will be a statement by the Chief Minister. And after that, then there's a matter to be dealt with in camera. But we continue with the debate. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Pamplin.
So, sorry, before Deputy Pamplin starts, can I just ask whether the statement could be circulated to us? Because we've got an ideal window so that can be done. Thank you, sir.
Yes, there's an ideal window where no one will be listening to this debate in which the statement can be raised. I wonder if it can be circulated. Has it been circulated?
Thank you, sir, and I won't take that personally, Deputy.
No, not
Good morning, sir. Good morning, members. Good morning, everyone. To start with this, and I hate to say to be brief, sir, because that usually means 15 minutes. But, however, since the Deputy joined the Assembly, and we must remember, not at the beginning of this political term, she has been an absolute asset and tour de force, and a tribute to herself. Many members, when we come into this Assembly, often don't speak, let alone get involved in parliamentary business. But in her first 4 years, much like my other inspiration of this Assembly, Deputy Alves, becoming the chair of PPC in her first term, it's an extraordinary achievement to new members for doing so. But I say that with a caveat because I understand where she's coming from with this. This has been a political, parliamentary hot potato for many, many years, which was brought to the fore because of the global pandemic. As members would probably imagine, I have done some research on this, and there's a fascinating piece of work by a Parliamentary International Journal of Parliamentary Studies, which looked at the remote participation and proxy voting in the United Kingdom House of Commons and compared it to many other jurisdictions across the world. It's important to note that the UK House of Commons introduced this idea based on family-friendly proposals back in 2018-19. It was then asked of the House, the relevant people, the equivalent to PPC, to look into matters relating to members who were not ill. They were simply unable to join, sir, because either for childbirth reasons or for tragic reasons. That is not an illness, and so it was looked into. It took them 2 years to come to the proposition that they brought. But then at that point, it was around the time of the global pandemic. And the UK House of Commons Speaker made a very good decision to allow a look at because of the public health emergency that was currently in place. What was agreed is very robust and very, very well governance, where the issues of certificates are issued. But the big caveat, of course, in the United Kingdom House of Commons is the size of the Commons, with many, many hundreds of members of Parliament, but equally how the parties work. And I return to this paper that it really sums it up, that the idea of proxy voting is an important factor in explaining the decision for political party reasons. Here in this Parliament, we don't have, even though we do have parties emerging and one very much established party, that this needs a lot of work and a lot of consideration. And I do not think today is that day. Equally, also, because we are soon to have a new greffier of the state, we are obviously going to have a new assembly. That could be a new chair of PPC and a new assembly. We cannot. And I think of the last assembly when a very interesting decision about P1, as it infamously is now known, hampered the then us as this new sitting, which has caused many controversial debates since that decision was made before we could. And I use that comparison because, for me, this Parliament, this chamber, is paramount. It has got to still stand for something, and I think there's too much slippage in the reasoning behind why the Deputy is bringing this, because I think the way we have operated and worked, especially at the beginning with the global pandemic, which the Deputy referenced by going to Fort Regent, because 2 years ago we did not have the vaccines, we did not have the knowledge, we didn't understand, and that was a protection of each other, which the public health emergency has always been about. 2 years later, we are in a very different place, like much of the community have been returning to work, but understanding now that, that one of the key issues is the environments in which we work, and as much as I love this historic place, this special place, it does bring challenges in terms of its ventilation, which is a key issue in terms of the transmission of viral diseases. However, I believe, Sir, you and your team have given great consideration to the members when they have asked and requested not to be here on terms of health and illness. We've seen that play out, and I commend you for that and the way the remote working works. And we have to learn from that and also put in place this system of teams going forward. But it's one step too far, too early. And I think just before the election, the public still see this as the governing ruling house of the island, and they want to see us here as much as possible. We have to trust the members of the public for explaining rational decisions. But the nuances of the debates over the last 4 years, and I think especially of the assisted dying debate, where being in this chamber and watching and looking and taking the emotion of that debate in this chamber, we've had other debates, of course, where people amazingly have changed their mind. It does happen during the debate, and that has also worked with hybrid sittings. And sometimes the nuances where people have suddenly disappeared and not present for votes. And also people who unfortunately may have to go on official state's business. But for me, attending this assembly is paramount. This is not a job, this is a way of life. And I think we have to take a step back at this stage, look at where we are. But that's why I cannot support this at this time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Pershard.
Thank you, sir. My dear friend, Deputy Pamplin, I think I'm going to start by trying my best to change his mind on this particular issue. And I'm also going to address some of the comments made by the Constable of St John as well, and hopefully change his mind as well. So firstly, Part A, I think, I don't think there's an issue with Part A, but just to recap, because we've left this overnight, Part A simply requests that when remote participation is generally allowed, which may not be the case at some point, we may agree as an assembly that we don't allow it at all, but Part A says when remote sitting is generally allowed, that members who find themselves in exceptional circumstances defined by the bailiff in guidance will be allowed to participate remotely. And Deputy Gardner gave a great example of that yesterday when she was stuck in the UK with COVID. She was well enough to participate remotely, but simply wasn't allowed to. And I think that we all agree that that is an exceptional circumstance. And we would all expect that guidance would have to be issued in order for those exceptional circumstances to be clearly defined. And any breach of that would indeed be a breach of the rules, as it would be a breach of standing orders when we break the rules in the chamber. So I don't think there's an issue with Part A, and I'm yet to hear someone speak out against it, so I won't dwell on that. Proxy voting in Part B. Well, it's first my intent to remind members that Deputy Gardner hasn't proposed what that what the rules and governance around that would look like. She has proposed that that is brought back to the Assembly. So first, it's worth reminding members that at that time, members will be able to weigh in on those guidance, on those rules, and play a part in defining and dictating what they should and should not look like. And members may decide to make that very, very, very narrow. Members might decide that that looks like, well, in the case where you have, as is the case for some members, you come to the Assembly in the morning, you're present in the morning, but you have a particular, again, exceptional circumstance which requires you to leave, say, a hospital appointment, or indeed if you wish to attend a funeral. In those particular cases, we might decide that those are the only instances where a proxy vote would be acceptable. And we have the power to make that decision. But what I don't think we should be doing is shutting the door and having that conversation, which is what we would be doing if we vote against this proposition. And I know this because reading the report accompanying the proposition and discussing the intent and the spirit of the proposition with the deputy, that is the intention. And we've had conversations about this because obviously the concerns are we don't want people to abuse the system. We don't want people to just never be here. But I think Deputy Gard and I had a conversation this very morning about the hierarchy of priority. We swear an oath saying that we will prioritise attendance in the chamber. So Deputy Gardner and I both agree, and I know members agree, that the priority is physical presence. If that is not doable because of a pandemic, for example, remote participation is the next best thing. A proxy vote in this proposition, in Deputy Gardner's mind and in my understanding of it, is an exception. It should only be used in exceptional circumstances where the first two things cannot happen. If you can't be present, if you can't attend remotely, then a proxy vote should be an option. And I think that is the spirit and intent of this proposition. And I think for members to close the opportunity to allow access in this way without even having a discussion around what the rules should be is a shame, actually. And for me, this is about inclusivity. This proposition is an issue of inclusion. Because if a member is ill and needs to attend a medical appointment during a sitting, and they are present in the morning and wish to have their vote cast in the afternoon when they cannot be present, I think they should be allowed and enabled to do that. This is about access and inclusivity. And that is the intent of this for me. There's absolutely no way that anybody would tolerate an agreement for proxy voting without any rules or guidance. And I think it's quite obvious and fair to state that no one in this room would expect there to not be issued guidance or rules following this debate. So if this passes, of course, there should be and will be member consultation. PPC have to look into the detail. So the bailiff will need to weigh in. That should absolutely all happen. But I don't think we should just shut the door on it because we don't want people to abuse the system. That argument needs to come in the next phase. Just commenting very, very briefly on the comment made by the Constable of St John about going back to normal, he's absolutely right. We all need to be here as much as possible because we know that the debate, discussion, relationships, working together is all benefited from a physical presence. The eye contact, it makes such a big difference. However, normal for some people hasn't always been inclusive. And so I would say, yes, let's get back to normal and all the good things of the old normal that work for everybody. But if we have an opportunity to develop our normal to be more inclusive and to give access to people who may be poorly, who have other responsibilities to attend to that they cannot avoid, let's also take the opportunity to make our new normal more inclusive. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And it's good to follow people because one of the things we have to do in this assembly is learn how to disagree effectively and do it in a thoughtful way. And this has provoked a debate, and I'm pleased that we're having this debate. But unfortunately, there are, I think, some issues with this proposition for myself. we've been through a really difficult time with COVID, as is everybody else, but we are here to represent people during COVID, and it's been one of the biggest challenges. And for somebody who's in there, this is the first time I've been in this assembly, those 2 years of COVID have really been an awkward one to deal with, because that's not the way I wanted it to be. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be here representing and stood with other members and really getting into the nitty-gritty of that debate. And it's been a challenge, notwithstanding the incredible work that's done to keep it going. And I think we all genuinely appreciate that. Personally, I really disliked meetings on Teams. I really disliked it online because it lacks something. And I think in person is so important for us in this assembly. I will say though, sir, that sometimes the briefings on Teams have been actually quite valuable, because you can spread your stuff out, you can ask the questions, you can take notes, etc. And I hope we don't lose that, because there is a forum there that can work. So let's get back to the proposition. What it actually says is that members should be able to participate remotely from outside Jersey in the event of an unforeseen circumstance. But the debate, sir, has gone into what I think are foreseen circumstances, such as being off island for specific reasons, and they are very different. I have a real concern at this stage, and where this assembly is, with the advent of Teams and post-COVID, that we are not in a situation where the public, or indeed, and it's difficult to say so, and that's why I started off by saying we need to learn how to disagree nicely, or indeed this assembly has the trust to say that that will work. It's a difficult thing to say publicly, but I have to say it, and I have to take on that challenge. I don't think we're in a position to do this yet. The second part about proxy voting, now in other jurisdictions what they do, I think in the UK what they do is they have a sort of agreement between the parties to say that if somebody's off on maternity leave, one of our members won't vote either. And it's a sort of a quid pro quo, I think the phrase is, to say that we'll do that. Now, we don't have that structure here. However, I do believe that at some point proxy voting for maternity or paternity or long-term illness or whatever is important, so that people can vote from a distance in terms of that situation. But we have to work out a way that that works. And I would like PPC to go away during the next assembly, and I think it's really important for the next assembly to vote on this, and not now, which is why I can't support it, because we have to look at the structure of that assembly. And what that assembly has to do, sir, is sit down and have a very frank and honest discussion about how it's going to conduct itself in terms of presence in this assembly. And that, I think, is going to be a really difficult one. And I suggest it happens early on so that people get the issues right out in the open from the beginning, because I think that would be the healthiest way forward. So I think then the third part does not simply say, come up with the best way for this to work. It says the amendments to the standing orders to implement paragraphs A and B. And so therefore, be very thoughtful about your voting for. If you vote for Part C only without Part A and B, it doesn't really make any sense in my opinion, sir. So what I would say is that if somebody's off sick, if somebody's ill, to a point where they're protecting each other, and I said this during the COVID debate, sir, we are going to have to rethink the way that we act when we're ill after COVID. For many occasions, and I worked in a profession where it was an absolute nightmare, nobody would take time off and then everybody would get ill. But we are going to have to rethink, sir, the way that we act. And if we are ill, we're going to have to take personal responsibility and say, I'm staying away from other people so that illness doesn't spread. Enabling that remote participation on island for very specific reasons, I think is something we do need to look at as an assembly, because we do have teams and there is a hybrid system, but we have to look at that hybrid system. Personally, so I'd like to see a hybrid system where there is a screen in this room so that members can, if you like, remotely attend in person visually as well as just with sound, and I think that would actually enable the system a little, if that's necessary. However, the priority is to be in this assembly and to represent our constituents. We've seen pressures on that. I have never supported the 3-week sitting, and I know we can have this debate. It's quite a nice debate at times because we disagree on it, and it's one of the things we can disagree in a nice way. I don't support the 3-week sittings because it does lengthen the time in between when we're stood here looking at each other and having those debates. I'm really worried, sir, about some of the things that have been perhaps suggested with the coming election about lessening question times, and it's as if that questions seem to be a problem. And so I'll be honest and say that right at the beginning of my time in this assembly, and I won't say who, because to be honest, I can't actually remember who it was, but somebody said to me, "Oh, you just asked too many questions." And I went away from that, and I thought, that's a very strange thing to say. You ask too many questions. You ask too many questions on behalf of your constituents. You want to gather too much information so you understand the workings of government. You want to understand gather too much information because you want to know what are the drivers behind these policies and how they're going to actually work. Well, I'm sorry, sir, you can't ask too many questions in those terms. And if those who are in government don't like that, then they need to get used to it. And they need to be prepared to deal with it and come up with concise answers. So, sir, anything that erodes what we're doing, I think, is a problem. And at face value, this looks like, well, actually, it extends what we're doing. But my problem is, sir, that as soon as you say outside of Jersey, you do have an issue with tracking that remoteness and the reason why. So I believe it puts pressure on you to make those decisions, and I don't think it will help us in this as an assembly. I don't think you should be put in that position, to be quite frank. I'm sure you can handle it, but that's not the point. I think that this assembly has to have its procedures clear, to the point, and reasoned. And I think this is just the wrong time, and it's bizarre that I'm saying that, I know, because I've argued so much against that. But with this particular situation, where we've been through COVID and where we are now, and at the end of this assembly, I don't think I can support this. I would like to see more work on proxy voting and a way in which we can do that effectively so that people aren't excluded. And I agree with Deputy Pershall about that. True inclusivity will mean that we'll have proxy voting. You cannot exclude somebody because they've had a baby or because they're on paternity leave. That is both misogyny in action, and there is a male equivalent, and I've forgotten what the word is, but there we go. But it's similar, so it happens. And we're not, get back to this putting children first thing, you know, we can't do that and then say that if you're an estates member, you can't put your children first. And we can be flexible, and we can have a working system where that happens. Finally, sir, I would say that in places I've worked, and I've worked in a number of different places, not just in teaching, but in all sorts of places, to be quite frank, taking time off because there was an unforeseen circumstance meant, well, you're just going to make the time up, I'm afraid, or you're not going to get paid. And so there was not that flexibility. Now, great, let's have that flexibility, but let's have it for all. Let's have equity, let's have equality, let's have genuine respect for our workforce. But until we do that, I think we are on shaky ground, that's all I would say. But I thank the Deputy for bringing this forward. And so can I just finish by saying, I wasn't suggesting, and I do apologise to Deputy Pamplin, it was just an unforeseen consequence of me trying to think of some sort of efficient thing which really has backfired, so I apologise to him. I listen to every word intently that Deputy Pamplin says. I can honestly say that. And he's not listening to me now, so that's great. So with that, I say thank you, but I'm afraid I cannot support this proposition too.
I don't think for a moment anyone took seriously the fact that no one was going to be listening, but at least I hope they didn't. Yes, Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. So in the very many jobs that I've been lucky enough to do over my lifetime, and things like planting potatoes by hand, cutting cauliflowers, driving tractors, being a herdsman and a vet, heavy goods lorry driver, commercial boat skipper, a manager, director of companies and stuff. In every one of those instances, it's been possible, if I wasn't there, to get somebody in to do my job for me. But so, as an elected member of this assembly, as the Deputy St Martin, I do not enjoy the privilege or the possibility of getting somebody in to do my job, because I'm elected by the parishioners of my parish, and I cannot just get somebody to deputise for me. I need to be here, and we need to be here, and we know that when we take the oath in the Royal Court. COVID was a strange time, and we knew we had to keep our Assembly, our legislature, working, and we came up with the rules to do that, and it did work, and it's a credit to you, sir, and everybody else in the team that we managed to get that to work. Deputy Tadier, who's not here, used some words yesterday. He used the word direction of travel, and I'd written down in my short speech, thin end of the wedge, because I, like he, are concerned about the way this proposition might take us. COVID came, we had some rules, we had to invent them very quickly, but we had some rules about how we were going to run this assembly, and those rules said we had to be in Jersey, and I found myself sitting in my office in St Martin thinking, what exactly does in Jersey mean? If I sit in my office, is there any difference if I sit in my garden? If I sit in my garden, is there any difference if I sit on the beach in St Martin or on my boat? If I'm sitting on the seashore at the Echoes, I'm still in my parish. Can I participate? If I get back on my boat and push closer to France and find myself, closer to France than Jersey, but still in Jersey territorial waters, am I in Jersey? And the reason I raise the point, sir, is where does it end? Because if we're not careful, we find we have members participating in this assembly from all parts of the globe. Deputy Gardiner made a really good case. We know we have to be in this assembly, and we take it seriously. We plan our holidays, we plan our events, we plan the way our lives work around the sitting of the states. And in Deputy Gardiner's case, I think we'd all agree that finding yourself in London a considerable amount of time before a States Assembly is due and having to isolate for 10 days was certainly outside of something that she had no control of. And in that case, there might well be an instance where we might want to make some arrangements, but the danger is in making those arrangements that I have to unfortunately use this word, sir, those arrangements get abused. And the Constable of St John quoted 2 cases yesterday. There are others, and I have to say, sir, yesterday, and it pains me to say this, but yesterday I had a whole load of emotions at lunchtime, sadness, frustration, anger, where members of this assembly who haven't been here this week turned up for the photograph and then went home again. That is letting us down, and that is one of the reasons why I'm not going to be able to vote for this today, because until we can find a better way of making sure we're doing what we should do, I can't see how we can move forward. Deputy Ward said he doesn't think this will work. I have to say I agree with him. And I'd like to see a lot. I'm not saying that we can't go back to this in the future, but I think it would be incumbent upon any proposition to bring a lot more detail before we see where we're going. My worry would be that we sign up to A and particularly B, and the detail comes after we've made the decision to move in that direction. So unfortunately for me, sir, as much as I can see Deputy Gardiner's case and understand why she's brought this proposition here today, I won't be able to support her.
Very much, Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. Much of what I was going to say has already been said, so I won't repeat it, sir. We did have an emergency. We did adapt very well, firstly by separation with Fort Regent and laterally with Teams, and that has worked extremely well and is possibly a model for the whole world. So such a thing happen again. But hopefully we've seen the tail end now of COVID, and I do believe we should get back to normal and everybody in the chamber whenever possible. I won't repeat what's been said. I do have a query regarding A, B and C. Is it possible to separate them, or does C eliminate that by asking PPC to implement paragraphs A and B? And I could be tempted to vote for A in an emergency, but certainly not B. But if they can't be separated, then unfortunately I'll have to vote against the whole proposition. Thanks, sir.
Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And call me a cynic, and some do, and I may well give the impression of being cynical about some of the business that goes on in this House. But my basic question is, can what is being proposed be used and or abused? And I reluctantly come to the conclusion that it could be abused, in the sense that I have a vision. It's not a vision, but it's a positive one, it's a negative one. It's a nightmare. I have a vision whereby someone who, a member of this chamber, has a flat in London and has a flat on the waterfront and votes by proxy half the time because they spend most of the time abroad. And that must not happen, I don't think. It's going to require far more detailed examination if we're going to have some sort of system of votes by proxy. But it's not this proposition today, and we have to be very careful about the proposition that may return some future time. Thank you.
If it assists members, I've given some brief thought to the ordering of the proposition. I think it would be possible to take A and B separately if the deputy wanted, because the consequence of, for example, passing A, not B, or vice versa, is that the reference to that subparagraph in C would simply fall away. And so I think that it would be possible, but that's a matter for the deputy. She will take the propositions as she wishes. Very well. Deputy Hegra.
Thank you, sir. We moved to 3-week sittings. There's a potential to move to remote participation. There's potential to have proxy voting, and there's potential to move to the Bahamas. Because quite frankly, I jest, sir, but I am serious. I do jest because when we moved from 2-week to 3-week sitting, one of my concerns was this: the only thing that we swear on oath to do is be in this chamber. And the more the opportunity is to have less sittings, the more opportunity for remote working wherever that may be, and then to have proxy voting on top of that, I feel we could end up in a very bad place. And once we're going that way, it's going to be difficult to change it. So what I'm saying is that we need to be very careful. I won't be voting for this, and I didn't vote for 3-week sittings. I'm fully aligned to equality. I am a mother, and I did a 24-hour rotating shift job, and it was a challenge. And it was a challenge not only for me, but obviously for my husband, because we had the same child, ironically. And it was difficult. And it was more difficult for some of my colleagues, because some of them actually both worked rotating shifts at the same time. We were fortunate that we did not. Unfortunately, I had very little childcare because I was an older mum. But I had very good neighbours, and I did have one of my sisters who helped me out and took my child to school when I came back off nights, because they actually thought I might be dangerous taking her myself. But the point is that we need to look at how we deal with equality, people being able to participate, and those people that need to look after their children. But also, let's not forget people's elderly relatives. Let's not forget serious illnesses with our partners or loved ones. There's all sorts of things that we need to look at. But I don't think that this is necessarily the answer. And I think this is what we need to actually look at, is how we can make it more inclusive, but still show and be here as much as we possibly can. For me, I would prefer to go back to 2-week sittings, because I actually believe that that's what the public anticipated that we would do. I've been voting since I was 18 years old. I was brought up in that environment. Once you couldn't wait to get to the age of 18. Not only could you go into a pub and have a drink, but you could actually go in and vote. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal to be able to vote. And I think that when people vote for us, they expect that we're actually going to turn up and be here. In fact, earlier in the week, we saw people campaigning outside, and I stopped and spoke to them. And they said, oh, thank you for speaking to us. But if we don't come in here, they're not going to be able to stand outside because they're not going to see any of us. And yes, we all know we've had a very difficult 2 years. But we've all had a difficult 2 years. Doctors and nurses have had a difficult 2 years. People in retail, none of them have had any time off. They've had to go into work every day. They can't work from home. And it's the same as all of our emergency services. And so I do accept we've had a brilliant and a very fortunate system. But let's be frank here. Do you genuinely believe that the remote working, the participation of people that aren't sat in here this week has been as good? Definitely not. Because, let's be honest, we get very distracted. I sit at home looking at a screen for 8 hours and I look at the bird that's sitting out the window, and then all of a sudden somebody arrives at the door. Oh, I'll just go, and you get distracted. If you're telling me that you can sit there for 8 hours at a screen and pay attention, I would doubt it. I certainly, sir, can admit that I cannot. I've got a short attention span and I need to be sitting here and I need to look across the assembly. Interestingly, I too remember, like the Constable of St John last year when we were very remote. In fact, there's a couple of people in this room that will remember the accident I had in the corridor behind when I came in and asked for some ice, and they looked at me as if, what's wrong with her? But there was very few, and I remember, and I've got a very sort of memory about who was dotted around on the opposite side of the room, and there was very few of us. And I accept in that scenario, that was acceptable. But we are moving forward, and we are asking people to go back to work. And so I do think that we need to be doing and being present in this chamber. And I think the public expect that of us. I fully appreciate what Deputy Gardner says about the situation that she found herself in. And hopefully that is going to change as things move forward with COVID. Hopefully it's going to change. The other side of it is, and somebody mentioned this yesterday, and it might have been Deputy Martin, if you're ill, actually you're ill. And that's why we can be mallard. We can be sick. I'm a very fortunate person. It's a very rare occurrence. But I actually have had two things, odd things, in the last 4 years. One was breaking my wrist, and was the other one when I went to the dentist and a little misdemeanor and my face exploded. And so the point is, I couldn't come into work, but quite frankly, was I actually in a position to be able to do it remotely? Actually, to be honest, I wasn't. I wasn't well. And there's a lot of people that aren't well, haven't been well, and we should be able to say, I'm not well, so I can't attend and I'm not going to participate. So I think we need to address that. In the relation to, and it was interesting yesterday because Deputy Gardner said about some of the urgent oral questions she'd brought forward, and maybe that's something that PPC could look at, that actually, rather than changing our rules about proxy voting or doing that, we could have actually said, well, actually, an urgent oral question, that person's indisposed, can we get somebody else to ask it on their behalf? That might be a rule that I certainly, for one, could live with, because I think that would actually be, make a little bit of sense, because the question's the same, and they can certainly, talk to the person and be able to feed that back in. The other thing is that there's our electorate, me included, I'll probably think this actually, maybe not now because I've been here for 4 years, but I used to think that when the summer came, you all went on holiday because everybody was gone. But actually, let's be frank, that's not true. And I remember in our first summer, when we launched our mental health review, I was at a wedding in the south of France taking phone calls and doing emails because actually we were working, and people say, well, you all have the summer off. And you have to try and say to them, well, no, we don't. If we move to something like this, I think they genuinely think we will all be on holiday on a permanent basis. And I think the thing is, that's why we really need to consider how we need to be inclusive. I fully accept that. I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt like everyone in this room has, and most islanders. And so we need to work out how we can do all of this, but still ensure that our participation in this assembly is as much as possible in person. In person. Everybody's been delayed on a flight coming back from a holiday. But the thing is, if you're delayed and you're stuck, and not obviously we've had the pandemic the last 2 years, and I'm sure a lot of us will remember about the ash in Iceland. That had people grounded literally across the world. It was far worse probably than COVID because people actually couldn't get back from America. And it's interesting because I think Deputy Ward said something about if you were a teacher or in the police or whatever, if you didn't come back for 2 weeks, you lost those 2 weeks of holiday. It wasn't a case of, oh, well, that's okay. Or you made that time up. So actually, I just feel that we need to look at this and we need to be able to be inclusive and help be inclusive and help people be able to facilitate their involvement within this environment. And that's why I also yesterday voted against staying late today. Because we do have to consider, beyond 5:30, let's be fair, most of us have already gone past the fatigue mode and we're on the way downhill. But also, people do have other commitments. And it's not only about childcare and looking after, we also have lives outside of this environment. And sometimes you aren't the choice maker. You don't choose when it's going to be your husband, wife's, partner's, child's birthday, or you've got a relative over. So sometimes you just can't say, I can stay late, or you don't want to. And I think the thing is, we put ourselves under pressure to say yes all the time, and we shouldn't. And that's another reason why I never wanted 3-week sittings, because I genuinely believe that I would prefer to sit every fortnight for 3 days, rather than sit for once every 3 weeks and then stretch it out, that we've actually gone from Monday all the way through to Friday. And let's be quite frank, most of us are exhausted. And on that note, I think I'll say thank you very much, and that's it.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think just to address the very last part of the previous speaker, sir, the last week, the last sitting, usually before the end of the Assembly, is always busy. It's not just because we've gone to a 3-week cycle. If it was a 1-week cycle, this would be full. Okay, so sorry to destroy the illusion there, but that's the way it is. We've actually tried to, as I think Deputy Pamplin, who's not there, pointed out, at least this time round, we are not rushing off to a nomination sitting, which I do recall, I'm not sure many other members do from that particular time, that I think we finished at 6 o'clock in the evening for nominations at 7, and that was not fun. Anyway, sir, I'm going to try and be a bit more positive for Deputy Gardiner, particularly as I was one of the people that I think she referenced in the debate, and possibly slightly tongue-in-cheek, sir, I was very, very disappointed, sir, because I did offer, as you will recall, that having been caught up with, I think it was the British Airways carnage around half-term, and flights being cancelled and things, I did offer to do questions about notice whilst I was away, because for unforeseen circumstances, there was no way I could actually get back to Jersey on time. And I was very disappointed, sir, that you turned me down. Senator Farnham was obviously delighted that he had to step into my place, which may be the alternative solution that we had, but it was obviously a particular circumstance. I have to say I was rather looking forward, sir, to accidentally putting my camera on and having a scene behind me of a mountain or something along those lines, sir. But anyway, obviously that was not to happen. However, the serious point, we have, as has been said, gone through an extraordinary 2.5 years. And we have adapted to technology in a completely different way at a much faster rate of change than we would ordinarily have thought about. So, and as hopefully this is relevant, sir, people will remember that we were criticised for the amount of IT spend we were putting in. But part of that first rollout was Office 365. I'm going to identify, because I remember Deputy Alves making some point about the merits of Teams. And I have to say, at that point, I did not know what Teams was. Boy, has that changed. And the point was, if we had not done that, sir, that would have, well, we'd have been in a fundamentally different and far more difficult position. Now, I'm not making the point there, but what I'm saying is that change from a lack of knowledge to where I think we've all now I won't say we've all, various people have got far more different levels of expertise in that area than me, but we have all changed our habits. And so for me, the technology side, we all know that, the impact of technology changes how we do things. What we've got to decide is, do we want to make another step or not? And actually, I was thinking around some of the arguments I've heard, and so the comment I think was made, the public rightly expect us to be in this assembly. However, sir, what we are talking about, and I'm particularly focusing on Part A, actually, if through unforeseen circumstances that individual cannot represent the public in this assembly, what's the next best option? Either they don't represent the public in this assembly, or they're allowed and facilitated to do it under very strong, careful circumstances to actually still carry out that representation, but doing it remotely. And I can tell you, actually, for the purposes of the Deputy St Martin, and I can't remember when it was when we were in a remote sitting, sir, and I was on state business, but I can tell that actually the Teams signal does work on the Echo House, sir. You can actually hear the States Assembly, if you wish to, in Jersey, in St Martin's, but separated by water. Now that raises issues, sir, and how we deal with things. But, sir, the technology does work. And we're not talking about that, actually, because that was a remote sitting, sir, and we were accompanying official visitors, sir. But if in circumstances that members are away and they are caught out, I do think, certainly for Part A, I think we should be asking PPC to look at that, which, as far as I'm concerned, is what's being asked under very careful circumstances. So I think Deputy Gardner is trying to find a solution to a problem that does happen. It's happened to me on at least 2 occasions. And for me, sir, I think it's something that we should look at. I do find sometimes when we've talked about, we don't want to do remote, but we want to be inclusive and all those type of things, there's a slightly contradictory argument. We've been swept up in all sort of areas, thin end of the wedge. I can't remember, we've gone all the way through 2 and 3 week cycles, et cetera, which I don't think is relevant to this debate. But for me, fundamentally, it's about actually, this is in particular circumstances, actually allowing us to continue to represent islanders when ordinarily we would not be able to. And I'm very much in the territory of, obviously, in accordance with guidelines issued by yourself, sir, is what the proposition says, and obviously asking PPC to put that together. That's, for me, is a matter of trust in what I think would be appropriate circumstances. Sorry, sir, I've just been scribbling down. I shall try and remove certain bits from the proposition. I would ask, actually, if Deputy Gardner would think about taking it in separate parts, because now I want to move on to Part B. Part B I do have a bit of an issue with. And okay, I note in stuff that Guernsey and a number of other assemblies do it. I do remember on a CPA conference there that I think we're informed that the voting, they did all the debates in that particular parliament, sir. They did all the debates all the way through the day, but the votes were at 5 o'clock in the evening. So actually, essentially, you kind of thought, well, what was the point of the debate? Because by that time, and obviously it was done by party majority, etc., and as I understand it, whoever it was gathered up the votes, effectively en bloc, and that was the outcome. And I'm not entirely convinced that in the nature of this assembly as we presently speak, that that's something I particularly could go for. And I think other people have spoken to that, so I'm not going to be quite so long on that area, but for me, I have a reservation around proxy voting. I think I would need a lot more work. There's nothing actually stops PPC looking at it in the round anyway. You can always do that and come back and say it works. I would definitely be supporting Part A. I will make a comment, sir. I think it was Deputy Herrigray said, about working in the office and about people, obviously, who do work 24-hour shifts and things like that. It reminded me, sir, I've actually had an FOI request at some point, which has asked me for the hours I work in the office, to say how many full days and how many half days I work, for example, within 9 to 5. The problem I have, sir, I have probably 3 offices. I have the office in Broad Street. In fact, technically, you could say 4 if here is one of them. I have my office at home. And, sir, I have this thing. And the thing with that is, if your office is where you hold meetings, I've held meetings on the south bank of the Thames, dialing in. I've been on the motorway going down to the south of France in telephone calls, obviously whilst my wife was driving. I've been in full Teams video links driving back up from France on the motorway, again, whilst my wife was driving. I've been away. The last delay I had, actually, we carried on with normal business. I had meetings with the CEO on the Monday evening. Funny enough, that was when we discussed the additional funding we wanted to put into Ukraine. Deputy Pinnell will remember that I rang her in a very expensive call for her on the Tuesday morning and said, did she have her checkbook ready? And by the Thursday when we were back, Thursday or Friday when we were back, we did the announcement about the extra £1 million of funding for Ukraine. So business carries on, sir, wherever we are. We don't actually have an office these days. I do take the point, by the way, that was made about if you are ill, because actually one of the debates, I think when I had COVID, sir, I was ill and not available for one day, but we had 3 days of debate. I came in later. I would have preferred much not to. But so we've got to watch the pressure there and things like that, because that's what we'll end up with. However, sir, deal with the proposition as we've always been told. At any time when remote participation in states meetings is permitted generally, that's condition number 1, the members should be able to participate remotely from outside Jersey in the event that unforeseen circumstances prevent their participation from in the island, with the circumstances permitting such participation to be determined in accordance with guidance issued by the bailiff. I think for me, sir, that is a strong position. It is something that if we are looking to continue to adapt to how technology has affected us, how we can then actually strengthen, in my view, the ability of us to represent the public in this assembly, for me, sir, it is definitely something that we should be looking at and we should definitely be supporting. And on that basis, I do urge many members, if they can, to certainly vote for Part A, if the Deputy will allow that separate vote. I won't be supporting Part B, sir, but I would, if PPC will obviously look at that and come back for a future assembly, that will be a matter of them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition?
So it's a point of order.
Point of order?
Yes, sir. Could you check the record, please, sir? Standing Order 56.
Yes, of course. You're entitled to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, because we're counting those participating online. I'm working on the assumption, because it's impossible to say, that anyone who is present online is actually physically listening. But as I can't know that, we give people the benefit of the doubt and we deal with that accordingly. Deputy Larry.
I think it's absolutely right that in the light of the last 2 years, we do look at how we embrace technology going forward to the benefit of the Assembly, not the detriment of the Assembly. And that's a big conversation. Everyone, every member will have opinions on it, and it's right that they're heard. I'm not sure that this morning is the right time to have that discussion, but it needs to be had with perhaps the new PPC after the next election, and with yourself, sir, so that we can see if we can make progress and all agree on a sensible way forward. So I'm as long as A is not locking us in, and that discussion will happen, I'm happy to support that. I can't go with B because for the reasons that have already been stated, and C seems sensible. So I would just, we're not going to fall out over it, but I do feel that the Constable of St John's words earlier in this debate yesterday afternoon were ill-chosen and have caused upset and offence, as he appeared to take a swipe at every member apart from himself. And I have to say that the cases he cited, from what I know, what I can gather, are not in breach of standing orders. So the Constable can't know the circumstances of every member of this House and why they're here or why they're not here, and he shouldn't leap to a judgment in that way. So I just feel, as I say, we're not going to fall out about it, but I feel that the Constable was out of order, and I know members are upset, and I'm sorry for that. Thank you, sir.
Conor Ballard.
Thank you, sir. Just following on from your comment earlier on about chorusy, and I think that's an element which would need further consideration if the gist of the proposition were to proceed. Sir, I think we've heard from many, and I think what I picked up is that we need to learn what we've done in the last 2 years, pick the good bits out of it, and take that further. And I would urge PPC to consider it. I don't believe I can support the proposition at this stage, but we must look ahead and take heed of what we have had to do over the last couple of years. And on a final point, just actually for clarity from the point of view of the Connétable of Grouville, I would say that the ability to get online in the Minkies is not good. The signal is poor down there.
Very well. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Gorst.
Thank you. So I just want to follow up on Deputy Labby, really, because I think he put his finger on what this issue should be about. We've been, or we're inclined to think it's about COVID, but the reality is, of course, it's about the enabling power of technology and how we use that to the benefit of islanders in this place. And that's far from straightforward, because the things that we can now do through technology, the places we can be, the meetings we can be in, the decisions we can make, perhaps weren't comprehensible to us prior to COVID. All of the work the Chief Minister's just explained, we used to have to do that on the old-fashioned telephone, sir, when we were away. Work's never stopped for parliamentarians, as we all know. But now we have technology which has advanced so much and has transformed where we can be and what we can do in a way that we hadn't envisaged. And therefore I think there does need to be that conversation, and the incoming PPC really need to consider how that can be used to enhance democratic processes, as we have done through necessity in COVID. There's no reason why we can't continue to set the standards and records and be the first parliament to use technology in a supportive and innovative way into the future. And I think that if A is given in that spirit, which I think, although it's based in COVID experience, I think it is given in that spirit, then in that spirit I can support it. But I would expect an incoming PPC to do a proper review. It's not something that they'll just come in and say, okay, yeah, everybody can stay at home, because that, we all know, is a nonsense for all of the reasons that we've said. Because although technology enables, one of the things that we know arising out of COVID, that without connection, without human interaction, not via screens, then all of our mental health suffers, and therefore being in this place has many, many benefits. So in that spirit, I can accept it. But if it were to come forward just as a straightforward yes or no issue, then I won't be able to accept that, because there's a bigger and more important piece of work that needs to be done. And we can either use technology to enhance trust and enhance engagement, or we can fall into the trap that many members have said of allowing those of us who might, for all good reasons, take advantage, and then that would undermine the parliamentary process and those elected to this place into the future. It's got to be dealt with carefully. I think there can be great benefits, but there are equally great pitfalls that we need to avoid. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Senators, any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Elves, but before I call on you, it occurs to me that I can probably be more refined where assessing whether there's a quorum or not by asking anyone participating remotely simply to note in the chat their immediate presence when I'm doing a quorum. Now, we're not quorate within the chamber. So could we have one person indicating they're here? Could anyone else participating? Yes, in which case there are another two, and so we are quorate. Thank you very much. No one else need to indicate their presence at this point. Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. This puts me in a bit of a difficult position, I think, as PPC Chair and Vice Chair of the Diversity Forum. I can say that there's been some quite robust discussions about this. Even before actually the pandemic, I do recall that in the Diversity Forum we did talk about proxy voting. with regards to those that have difficulties getting into the chamber or maybe on maternity leave and other things that have been already mentioned in this debate. I think the point regarding foreseen and unforeseen circumstances that members have raised in this debate is actually a very good one. I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but I do actually have an autoimmune disease. And I know that there are others in this chamber that also have autoimmune diseases similar to mine. At the moment, I have it quite well controlled, fortunately. But this isn't always the case. And there has been times where it has been difficult to work. And that's been the case for me for many years, even before I was elected and when I was still teaching. And I would often, this probably comes back to the point that was made, I think it was Deputy Lahegara, as to whether we should, if we're not well enough, whether we should actually be working or not. But there was often times in teaching, I know that I would drag myself into the classroom because it was easier than actually providing work for the supply teacher and not having it get done. So I think it's really important that we consider that sometimes people don't have or have conditions that aren't always linear, and that there can be things like flare-ups from day to day. But I think whatever happens, I want to echo what Deputy Ward said about applying these types of things equally and to our public service employees as well. And I think there probably needs to be a lot more awareness of things like autoimmune diseases, which aren't visible. People really don't understand quite how debilitating it can be to have one of these diseases. And in a way, I'm grateful to COVID for highlighting things like fatigue, which is something I've suffered with the past 10 years. And there are times where it's very difficult to drag myself out of bed. And there are times it's very difficult to even fall asleep because of it. So I think just drawing on some of the words as well that the Deputy Lahegara said, moving on from that, regarding the summer recess and the public perception around the work that we do, there is a body of work that I'm really grateful for that the State SCREF communications team have started around what members do and our roles as members and what that involves. I hope that that body of work can continue and that we can continue to raise that awareness with the public to make them aware that this isn't a part-time job, as some may think it is, and what our job really involves. Personally, I don't know whether I'm going to be here in the next assembly or not. I don't know whether I'm going to be part of PPC or not. But I would like to give that assurance that these two options that Deputy Gardner has brought, and I'm grateful for her to bring this to debate. I don't think the timing is great, but you know it is what it is. I would like to give my assurances that I would like to see this looked into. I think ultimately it's not a simple option, and those of you that have read the PPC comments, hopefully only a page long again, we like to keep things simple and concise, list some of the different options there and the possible issues around each one of these things that are being proposed today. So I think whatever happens with this proposition, I think members of PPC will agree that we will be recommending that this is looked into in the next term. I think that, once again, if it hadn't been for COVID, it would have probably have been looked into already this term. But there is a lot of work and research that needs to be done into this. Thank you, sir.
Much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Gardner to respond.
Thank you, sir. And I'm grateful for all members who contributed to this debate. I will follow the last speaker, Deputy Chair of PPC, because as Deputy mentioned, this proposition is a request, it's enforcement, it's asking to look into this and not to push it back for another 2, 3, 4 years. It's something we'll be there to look at. We are not making decision, Deputy Pamplin mentioned. We are not saying this is Deputy Ward, another who mentioned this is the decision. If you look at the comments of PPC, it's something that will need to be looked and possible to work out. Next, I agree with 100% with Deputy Lahagarat, with Constable of St. John, with Deputy Public, with Deputy Ward, with Deputy of St. Martin, but actually with all speakers, we all agree our place to work is in the Assembly. This is our workplace, no discussion. Now, I'm going back, and I started to, our priorities were mentioned by Chief Minister, by Deputy Parshad. I think our first and the most important priority is to represent our constituencies, represent the people who elected us. As Chief Minister mentioned, the best place is in the Assembly. But if it's impossible, and it wasn't a proposition about me, I know that everybody mentioned, but it was several other occasions that happened to the people. If we are not able to do it because of the circumstances out of our control, and when remote participation is allowed generally, we need to look into this. And Deputy Lahagarat said, let's look into somebody would be able to ask urgent questions. Actually, I asked to somebody who would ask already submitted questions. I was not allowed to ask if nobody could ask submitted questions. But I had urgent questions, and I reached out for several members before this day, because the urgent question anybody can ask. But everyone has their own urgent question. But that was my urgent question, and I needed to represent my constituencies, which I was not able to do. And somebody who was on Acre House, if you can catch that, they actually can represent constituencies, and me in London couldn't represent constituencies. There was no difference. So it is a priority. First priority to be in the state, first priority to represent constituency in the state, online, and if not proxy. And this proposition actually asking to introduce this priority. I'm going back to I'm not sure how members remember the debate from the 21st of September 2021. I saw that I'm going to the history, but I decided to look into the Hansard of this debate this morning, 5 o'clock. And interestingly, we decided to continue remotely with hybrid attendance. And I personally, in this assembly, warned that this is danger. Deputy Morel said, I think we need another proposition to essentially put a sunset clause. There is to say this need to be revisited in 3 months or so, because otherwise the danger that this does drift and does become a norm. They think we need to be aware that there is a major weakness and structural weaknesses, so to speak, in this proposition. And I followed Deputy Morel, and I said, what does it mean if wish, who wish, how wish? Everybody needs to have some structure in place. It was my words here. We need to understand procedurally how it works and what does it mean do we not wish. I also stated that time that I would prefer to bring amendment, but we didn't have time. Actually, all of us responsible that it's drifted to the place, and yes, it looks like might some abuse, it become a luxury, it was some wish, but for me, because somebody didn't follow the expected norm and wish to stay at home, now we try to say nobody stays at home. It's illogical that might some abuse the benefit the system. We are going to get anyone from this benefit. So during the pandemic, we moved from very clear one rigid rule to be here to completely no boundaries, wish rule. What this proposition actually saying, let's get, the Constable of St. Brelade said, let's learn from the experience, let's learn what's worked, let's learn what's not worked, and the PPC can make a decision. I absolutely agree, interesting enough, with Senator Gorson and Chief Minister. We have to embrace this technology. We have technology. We don't need to throw it now away. We just need to find clear rules. Deputy Pumpling, you mentioned about the robust system. You're right. This robust system was completely missing with our decision. And it's all our responsibilities that we didn't go back, we didn't write amendment, we didn't revisit, and we let this drift. So this proposition actually saying, let's embrace what we have, let's have clarity and go forward. And by the way, with special circumstances, Deputy Tadia yesterday raised a very important topic, because I put unforeseen circumstances, but for example, he mentioned members or family members on treatment in the UK. And there is an ability of the people, they're not ill. If I say, oh, you're ill or not, no, there are people with health complications that they might not be able physically to come to the assembly, but if there is remote participation is allowed, they're able to participate. If I'll break my leg, my head would work, but I'm not sure that I'll be able to go to the assembly. And actually, by rejecting this proposition to consider flexibility, we are saying very clear message before the election to the public, people with disabilities and health complications will struggle here. Maybe I'm taking too far, but this is what I feel. Proxy vote. I understand that by the way, I'm going to take two parts separately, A and B, so everyone will feel what about the proxy vote. Yesterday, I apologize if I kind of raised Deputy Parashut, because yesterday Deputy Parashut said I would like to go and to put my child into bed. I don't want to stay till 8 o'clock. It's not right for me, for my family, and for the balance. But if we would have proxy vote, and Deputy Parashut, for example, would be able to present her proposition at 4 o'clock and to go for an hour to put her child to sleep and to say good night, and she would, Deputy Parashut would, according to the rules, robust rules, will answer proxy vote with the greffier, with the bailiff, we could continue to work, and we have this flexibility, and she doesn't need to be remote. There is lots of things to look at, and equality isn't equal provision of the same thing. Different people have different access needs. We adopted, we learned from the experience, we must take the benefits, we must eliminate misuse and create rules that enable this new technology to bring us forward and enhance, I'm echoing Senator Gorst, enhance participation, enhance the contribution. And I also in that particular debate saw that Deputy Tadia said there was a 2008 when laptops were not allowed to be used in the state chamber, only iPads. So we are moving. We will continue to go and involve. And what I'm asking to, as I'm closing my speech, and apologies if I haven't mentioned everyone, comments of PPC very clear. Privilege and Procedure Committee may wish to come back to the Assembly with another in-principle proposition to flesh out some of these details before amendments to the standing orders are lodged. It is possible. What we are voting for, it's actually put this consideration in the center of the debate and to raise next Public Accounts Committee to agree. So I move my proposition, ask for the appel, and Part A, Part B.
I'd like to take them separately.
Yes, please.
So it seems to me that, it seems to me that if either Part A or Part B are adopted, Part C must be adopted as well. But we'll have to take them separately just as a matter of structure, I think. So the vote is on Part A of the proposition. The appel is called for. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote, and those participating remotely to indicate their vote in a normal way. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The Part A has been adopted, 24 votes pour, 16 votes contre, no abstentions. We now come on to Part B, and I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Part B has been defeated. 5 votes pour, 32 votes contre, no abstentions.
Can you have them both ways, please?
Both ways, yes.
Those voting pour in the chamber, Deputy Guida, Pershard and Gardner, and in the chat, the Deputy of St John and Deputy Masson. Those voting contre in the chamber, Senators Gorst, Farnham, Le Fondre, Valois, Moore, Pallett and Mezek. The Conotabs of St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, St Juan, St Martin, St John, St Clement. Deputies Southern, Lewis, Pinnell, St Martin, St Juan, Labby, St Mary, Truscott, Young, Ash, St Peter, La Hegera, Ayer, Ward, Alves and Pamplin. And in the chat, the Conotab of St Helier and Deputy Martin.
Well, I'm prepared to take C on a standing vote, it seems to me, because it must
Sorry, can we call for the appel, please?
You call the appel? Very well. The appel is called for, and I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote.
See, it's ratifying the A, just, yeah.
I beg your pardon. Yes, C obviously is confined to A because B has fallen away because the Assembly has not adopted it. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Part C has been adopted. 26 votes pour, 14 votes contre, no abstentions.
The 14, please.
Can we have
14?
Yeah. Can we have both ways, please?
Both ways, yes.
Those voting for, Senators Gorst, Farnham, Le Fondre, Valois, Moore and Pallett. The Conotabs of St Brelard, Brouville, Trinity, St Peter, St Juan, St Martin and St John. Deputies Lewis, St Juan, Labby, Truscott, Young, Guida, St Peter, Pershard and Gardner. And in the chat, Deputy of St John, Deputy Martin, Deputy Masson and the Conotab of St Helier. And those voting contre, Senator Mezek, the Conotab of St Mary and St Clement. Deputies Southern, Pinnell, St Martin, St Mary, Ash, La Hegera, Ayer, Ward, Alves, Pamplin and Deputy Higgins.
Well, before we move on, during the course of the debate on this last proposition, we had and entirely inappropriate if dulcet tones from the bell of HMS Jersey, which I understand was rung by a member of the Assembly not in the chamber. It was certainly heard by me, and I believe it was heard in this area. I won't name the member, but I would expect a contribution to the Greffiers Fund. It's clearly inappropriate to sound the bell when the sound might reach into the chamber. It's within the precincts of the Assembly, and order of decorum should apply. Very well.
I am happy, sir. I was having a lively conversation with the Deputy of St Peter, and the bell was inadvertently rung, for which I take full responsibility, sir. It was certainly not an intentional loud sound, but it has a habit of reverberating through the building, sir, for which I apologise. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for confirming that. It's the nature of a bell that it's meant to be heard, if it couldn't be heard, it wouldn't be much of a bell.
I have learnt that, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very well, we now come on to a statement to be made by the Chief Minister. Members will, I hope, have received and had the opportunity to study at length the text, and I call on you, Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. Sorry, so it's your last comment is unfortunately stuck in my mind. Can I thank you, sir, for the permission to do the statement today. Obviously, we'd hoped to do it at the end of yesterday afternoon, but obviously time did not permit. So, sir, from Friday, the legal requirement for mandatory self-isolation for positive cases will end. However, we will continue to advise anyone who is positive to stay at home for a minimum of 5 days and test regularly, but the legal requirement will end. Last week, we also announced further relaxations to the COVID-19 schools policy, which has seen the removal of masks and bubbles in education settings and a reduction to the frequency of LFT testing for students and staff. The Scientific and Technical Advisory Cell, STAC, met for the last time last week as part of our de-escalation. Whilst the cell will no longer be meeting weekly, they remain on standby, and a subgroup has been set up to continue to coordinate matters. STAC members have been fundamental to providing scientific and technical advice to government throughout the pandemic response, and I would like to thank each and every one of them. Their advice has been integral to the decisions we've taken as competent authority ministers and the response we have marshalled as an island. In line with the rest of our de-escalation activity, we will also be changing the frequency of the COVID-19 data reporting from daily to once a week. The last daily update will be published on tomorrow, Friday, and from next week, we will move to weekly reporting, which will be published online every Thursday. It has been a little over 2 years since the WHO declared COVID-19 a pandemic on the 11th of March 2020. Members may recall those crucial months in March and April when island life changed so rapidly. Within 24 hours of the WHO's announcement, the Emergencies Council had met and agreed a support package for businesses. Within days, we'd introduced social distancing for over 65s and opened an on-island testing facility. In the weeks that followed, we outlined a 180 million support package for islanders, established a community task force, introduced a border testing regime, and constructed a Nightingale Hospital. And shortly before the end of 2020, we began our successful vaccine programme, delivering the first doses ahead of schedule. Since those early days, almost every aspect of island life has been affected to some degree, and every islander has had a part to play in our response. I am proud of how Jersey has acted as a community during the pandemic, and I want to thank all islanders for their diligence, their care, and for their patience over the last 2 years. It has been a difficult period for us all. It is in large part thanks to the efforts of islanders in following the guidance, and especially the majority who've gone out and got vaccinated, that we are now in the position to make one final relaxation in our measures. As we learn to live with COVID-19, we will need to remain vigilant to any significant developments in the global response to the virus. It is remarkable to think of just how far we have come as an assembly, as a government, and as an island during the course of the pandemic. We've worked at speed to bring together experts from across the government and beyond in the face of this virus. We worked across government to establish our excellent track and trace programme. We've worked with Microsoft to develop an internationally recognised border testing regime, amongst other things. we worked with MasterCard to develop the very successful Spend Local card. This was the first of its kind and was later replicated in Northern Ireland. This Assembly, during the pandemic, has worked at pace as we tabled urgent COVID-19 related legislation and became the first Parliament in the Commonwealth to meet entirely online. I would like to thank members for their support and their challenge respectively, and I also want to thank you, sir, His Excellency and the Statescraft for all of your support and advice as we've adjusted to new ways of working. Today, we remain in a strong place following the emergency phase of the pandemic. Throughout, we have protected lives and livelihoods, and we remain in a good financial position. COVID-19 has cost our island over £300 million in both lost income and our wide range of measures to support lives and livelihoods over 2020 and 2021. However, the latest projections are that COVID-19 borrowing will be vastly improved and we will completely repay the debt by the end of 2025. So yesterday I published a much fuller report providing an update on our response to the conflict in Ukraine, and which also reflects on the government's work over the last 4 years, and where I extend my thanks to a number of members, including scrutiny. In concluding, however, sir, I would like to pay tribute to the Council Ministers and to our Assistant Ministers who have ably supported our portfolios. I have been told on a number of occasions that I was unlucky to be Chief Minister during this time. And actually, sir, I don't regard it that way. It has been an absolute privilege to lead the government during this time with the team that I have had. That is what the role of Chief Minister means, and we've definitely stepped up to the mark. I've been very fortunate to have the love and support of my family, in particular my wife and my children, without whom this role would have been immeasurably harder. And so it is often easier, as we all know, for the negative voice to sound the loudest, but that is when one needs to stand back and look at the bigger picture. I look for solutions to implement change, and there is one phrase I think does sum up what we should be about as states members. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. It's to make a positive contribution in our role in this Assembly. If there is one lasting impression I would like to leave behind, it would be that we've worked determinedly to take those long-term, generational decisions which will ultimately only be to the significant benefit of islanders now and those islanders of the future. We have saved lives, we have protected livelihoods, and we leave the island in a strong financial position after some of the biggest challenges we have seen in our lifetimes. As custodians, we hand over to the next Assembly and the next Council of Ministers to build on what we have done. Thank you, sir.
Minister. There is now a period of 15 minutes in which members can ask questions of the Chief Minister on anything in this statement. Does any member wish to ask questions?
So,
For some reason your light doesn't show up on here, but Deputy Ward.
thank you, sir. I suspect that might be happening. Thank you. As Chief Minister, first of all, I'd just like to say that one of the things I would thank is those staff who have provided vaccines, and I've said it before, sir, and I'll say it again, Chief Minister, thank you to science for being there, for developing these things, because without them I think we'd be in a very different place. The question I'd like to ask the Chief Minister, sir, is regards, there is now not a requirement to isolate legally, but there's advice to isolate. I just concerned what the Minister's advice can give, the Chief Minister's advice can be for members of staff who perhaps may get pressure, because there's been a lot of pressure on workplaces for staff to be there, if they do feel they're COVID positive, to go back to work when they feel they shouldn't, because there's no mandatory requirement now. Good employers won't do that, sir, but let's be realistic about the world, there are some employers out there who might take advantage. I just wonder what the Chief Minister would say to them, and whether he could just urge them to be on the side of their employees when they need to be. Thank you, sir.
I think what we're trying to say, sir, is that where we are now is we are basically saying, said this before, that the impact of COVID because of vaccination is now less than if we had a bad flu season. And therefore, one would expect, that's why we're moving away from a mandatory position to an advisory position. And so I think What we do need to recognise, we know there are at least 2 members that I can think of straight away who are presently testing positive and are not feeling particularly well, at various points have not felt particularly well with this virus. So it's going to depend very much on the individual circumstances. We have made sure that there will be modifications of, I think it's the short-term benefits, that in other words, it will apply for in terms of sickness. I think all we can say, all my advice is that be sensible to both employees and employers, and it will depend on the circumstances that people are operating in. Are they capable? Somebody can be positive and be feeling absolutely fine. Are they able to work? Are they able to work in a circumstance where they're not going to pass it on to other individuals? And there'll be others who will be feeling absolutely terrible. And obviously, my advice would very much be that they should be isolating whilst they recover. I think that's all I can say. It is very much in the hands of the individual relationships between employers and employees, and people should be sensible.
Supplemental question, Deputy?
No, thank you, sir.
Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. My question is relating to a statement that Dr. Muscat is releasing that was brought up yesterday in response to a website that is claiming the reported side effects from COVID-19. Can the Chief Minister echo those words and draw light to them in reaction? I know it wasn't in his speech, but I think I'd be grateful. Thank you, sir.
Yes, I'm very happy to. Obviously, members will have had a copy of the press release, and very much what it's saying is that if there are side effects, that they should be reported through the standard channel, sir, which is what's which is what's known as the yellow cards scheme. And frankly, sir, I haven't looked at the website in question, but on the basis that there has been a note issued, I would treat any of those sort of ad hoc informal websites with a fair degree of caution and stick to the official channels for reporting these type of things, sir.
Supplemental, Deputy Pamplin?
Yes, thank you, sir. And on the subject of Dr. Muscat, it gives us, the Assembly, another opportunity to thank his service specifically and his team. But given the light that Stack is standing down and his role, sir, as Deputy Medical Officer of Health, can the Chief Minister allude to his role going forward in terms of the new Public Health Director that is in place? Because I think the island have grown with a very grateful heart to Dr. Muscat, and we'll look forward to seeing him in the coming periods and months. Thank you, sir.
Insofar as it relates to COVID, you could answer.
Yes, sir. I mean, obviously, I'm always very leery about commenting on individual members, ultimately members of staff, so I obviously can't go into that territory. What I will do, sir, in joining the Deputy, and I hope the entire Assembly will agree, is a massive vote of thanks, not only to Dr. Muscat, but to all the members of staff, and so I will say to ministers as well, and to this Assembly, for how we've come through in dealing with COVID. But as you say, particularly to all of the teams and all the medical professionals and all the others who've helped Islanders as a whole, sir.
Deputy Southern.
Thank you, sir. Yesterday we learned that in the UK, the courts had ruled that the transfer of people from hospital beds into care homes was not a lawful act. To what extent does the Minister believe that we are in a similar position to the UK in that we have acted unlawfully, perhaps?
Sir, I have to, obviously, we'll be taking some further advice, as will the Minister for Health, but sir, my understanding is that the issue centred fundamentally around the lack of testing, sir, but I would want to get further details before commenting any further, sir.
Supplemental, Deputy Southern? No? Deputy Young, you're asking for a question. You are a minister. It's not customary for ministers to ask questions of ministers.
It is about...
sorry. What I'm saying is I'm not going to allow you to ask a question because you're a minister.
Yes, but sir, no, it wasn't a competent minister, and this is about a civil matter.
That's you're still a minister, and therefore you can get whatever information from the Chief Minister you want, either in the Assembly or out of it.
I accept your ruling, sir, but it is a matter of public concern that I wanted to raise.
Senator Meze.
Thank you, sir. The statement referred to a reduction in the frequency of use for lateral flow testing for students and staff. More broadly on the issue of LFTs, could the Minister outline what the plans are for their supply for our community, as they do, of course, remain an important way where members of the community can take responsibility and take whatever precautions they feel necessary. So could you just let us know what the future for that provision is?
Sir, at the present circumstance, my understanding is they continue free until June at the earliest, and essentially we will continue to monitor, and as circumstances continue to evolve, sir. Without making any commitments at this stage, I'm absolutely sympathetic to the comments that Senator Mezek has made. There will come a point, obviously, when we need to make that transition across. What we haven't yet decided, I don't think, sir, is will that be the end of June or will it carry on longer? It will depend on what the state of the virus is, I think, at that time.
Well, supplemental question, Senator? Does any other member wish to ask a question of the Chief Minister? Deputy Pamplin, yes.
Thank you, sir. Also, in the United Kingdom, there have been plans revealed to reduce the public health teams that were put in place to manage the pandemic. As the Chief Minister in the discussions, because I have been trying to read it in the statement, sir, are there any plans of changing any of the things that have been put in place to support the government in easing through the handling of the pandemic in these transitional periods? Any reductions of staff or loss of service, specifically around the pandemic? Thank you, sir.
So again, I'm always very cautious about announcing things involving staff before obviously the relevant discussions take place. But it is a matter, so I think of if not common sense, but I think common sense rather than public knowledge, that as, for example, the pressures on contact tracing and the requirement to do much more testing has seen increases in staff at various times. As the requirement reduce, it is likely that that particular role will diminish. The question will be at what level we keep a core, and also then, sir, actually, we've got some fantastic people in the contact tracing side, and the question will then be, and there have been discussions around that, whether we can actually take those skills and apply them elsewhere in the organisation, effectively backfilling some of the vacancies that we already carry. So I think it's about as far as I can go, sir, in the public domain. Thank you, sir.
Well, supplemental, Deputy Pamplin. Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I just asked the Chief Minister whether he thinks it's right that doctors, when people have been reporting to them COVID effects of, say, vaccination, in fact, I might just add in particular, I've raised this before, one person contacted the helpline, was told, you don't report to us, you have to go through your doctor. They did, the doctor phoned them back, and they got a bill for £36 just for simply reporting that they'd had some side effects. Does the Chief Minister think this is acceptable? Thank you, sir.
I hate to say this, sir. I think before I commented on that particular, I'd like to know the specifics behind the circumstances, sir, before I comment publicly. Thank you, sir. But happy to discuss with the Deputy.
Supplemental, Deputy Higgins. Very well. Deputy Sutton.
No, sir, it was, it was something I reported to the Health Minister, but no actions has been taken by him or his officers. Thank you.
Well, that's not a supplemental question, that's a statement by way of a speech. So we'll just refrain from that. Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. What progress, if any, has been made in identifying the impact of long-term COVID on our community? And when will the Minister, when does he intend to report back to this chamber in order to better analyse the impact of long-term COVID?
So the data gathering in terms of long-term COVID, I can't remember the date it started, but there was an effort to obviously identify people who are defined as having long-term COVID, and those have fed into some of the statistics, I think, that have been given to members in the past. In terms of dealing with the impact on individuals of long-term COVID, the part of the health and social recovery funding, sir, that the Assembly agreed at the end of last year, as well as dealing with things like improvements in mental health, things like countryside access, which the Conotable of St Peter is chairing, which is all about community engagement and again, hopefully volunteers, and again getting out into the open and nature. One of the programs is about assisting people who have been identified as having long-term COVID. In terms of the an assessment, sir, I'll have to come back to the Deputy on that in terms of when that is due to be reported. My expectation, sir, it'll be due during the summer months, sir.
Supplemental, Deputy Secretary. Third question, Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. My question is in relation to the commitment to addressing the effects of the mental health of the effects of the pandemic on islanders, which I believe the Minister was alluding to earlier. And has he read our review of mental health services, which we do touch on this subject, and will he commit to the findings of and working together the impacts and addressing those concerns that we've raised? Thank you.
So, since it's been released, I have not yet had a chance to fully go all the way through it. It is in my reading pile, I do promise that, and I do will at the very least be also reading the summary and the findings and recommendations. However, sir, as the hopefully Deputy will recall, and as I've just said, we have specifically put money aside and funding aside through programmes, some of which are starting, and some of which are due to start over the next few weeks, which is about what we called COVID recovery, effectively health and social recovery, and that is very much about particularly with mental health in mind, and some of the programs are designed to be things like improving or encouraging people to go into sort of arts territory, or as I said, engaging with nature, and really just trying to do something different, but in terms of dealing with, well, fundamentally, recovery of our community from what has been a really, really tough 2 years.
Supplemental question?
Yes, following on that, is the communication of the statistics available, especially when it comes to the very difficult subject of suicide, and the numbers recently released by the Office of National Statistics United Kingdom and the Lancet Journal, and how that is appropriately used in the terms around the effects of serious things like lockdown and the effects, that the statistics and the actual evidence is put out there as effective communication. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, so I wasn't entirely sure what the actual question was. Is that, are we going to be making sure we handle those sorts of statistics carefully? Right. So obviously, yes, sir. I will make the point, although I think what the Deputy is also referring to is longer term consequences. But obviously it is worth remembering that and it's a horrible subject, sir, that in terms of deaths, in 2020 we had no excess deaths. And in 2021, it was either within the boundaries of normality, if that's again the right expression, or again, it was not excess. And actually for 2022, the feedback we've had so far is very much similar. So that's why we are very, very confident, is the wrong expression, but in stating that we have protected lives and saved lives during the last 2.25 years, and that has obviously been the focus. But obviously, sir, we all recognise that there will be longer term consequences, and that's why we put the programmes in place. And my expectation is that data would be gathered, would be considered very carefully by public health, for example, by the health minister and his successors, and then if further programmes are required, obviously, and we need obviously to understand those circumstances. I think the big things, sir, you have things like the listening lounge, we do have other measures. If people are feeling in difficult circumstances, speak to friends. If they're really stuck, speak to their political representative to get those contact details as to who they need to go to. With the listening lounge, I would suggest would be a very good first point of call.
Exactly. Brings the time allocated for questions to the Chief Minister on this matter to an end. Very well. The next item of public business is...
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask when in the order paper you were thinking of allowing me to ask the urgent oral question which you've approved?
I thought first thing tomorrow morning would be the appropriate time, something that gives the recipient of the question the opportunity to consider an answer rather than having a sprung on them, as it were.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes. Very well. We now come on to P72, which is an in-camera debate, and I must ask anyone who is not a member of the Assembly to leave the Assembly now. Public gallery. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members participating remotely to vote in the usual way. It's not actually, so we're getting it in the chat, but we're not getting it in the chat. Sorry? Right, we'll have the app on one minute. Yes, are you able to call it? That's done. I'm afraid we can't register the votes electronically for some reason, so we'll have the appel nominal, which the greffier will now call. So, Deputy Gardner, you haven't voted because, because electronically we can't do it. I've just explained we need the appel nominal. So everyone's name will be called in order and they will have to indicate pour, contre or abstain. Very well. Appel nominal.
Monsieur Senator Gorst. Gorst not here. Senator Farnham. Senator Ferguson.
Present. Sorry, I mean, forward.
Senator Ferguson, is it pour, contre or abstain?
Pour.
Thank you.
Senator Fondre. Senator Valois.
Pour.
Senator Moore.
Pour.
Senator Pallett.
Pour.
Senator Mezek.
Pour.
Connétable Saint-Helier.
Pour.
Connétable St. Lawrence.
Pour.
Connétable St. Brelard.
Pour.
The Connétable Grouville.
Pour.
The Connétable Trinity.
Pour.
The Connétable St. Peter.
Pour.
The Connétable St. Mary.
Pour.
Connétable St. Juan. The Connétable St. Martin.
Pour.
The Connétable St. John.
Pour.
Connétable St. Clement. Deputy Martin.
Pour.
Deputy Southern.
Pour.
Deputy of Grouville.
Pour.
Deputy Lewis.
Pour.
Deputy Tadier. Deputy Higgins.
Pour.
Deputy Massel.
Overwhelmingly pour.
Deputy Pinnell.
Pour.
Deputy of St. Martin. Deputy of St. Juan.
Pour.
Deputy Doublé.
Pour.
Deputy Labby.
Pour.
Deputy Wickenden. Deputy of St. Mary.
Pour.
Deputy Truscott.
Pour.
Deputy Young.
Pour.
Deputy Ash.
Pour.
Deputy Morell. Deputy Guida.
Pour.
Deputy of St. Peter.
Pour.
Deputy of Trinity. Deputy of St. John.
Pour.
Deputy Lehegra. Deputy Ayer. Deputy Pershard. Deputy Ward.
Pour.
Deputy Alves.
Pour.
Deputy Pamplin.
Pour.
Deputy Gardner.
Pour.
The proposition has been adopted. 39 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. Usher, I don't know if Mrs. Hart is in the precincts of the Assembly, but if she is, she can be told it's safe to return. Very well. The next item of public business is amendments to Standing Orders Machinery of Government's Subcommittee P64, lodged by Senator Valois. And before I ask the greffier to read the proposition, Senator, there's one amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers. Are you accepting that? Yes. In which case, do members agree that the proposition could be taken as read as amended by the amendment of the Council of Ministers? No vote of dissent on that, in which case I ask the referee to read the proposition as amended.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to make the following amendment to the Standing Orders of the States of Jersey with effect from the 22nd of June 2022.
Senator.
Thank you, sir. I'm proposing this amendment to standing orders following the work of the PPC Democratic Accountability and Governance Subcommittee. Members may remember during the debate that Deputy Young initiated in September 2020, I did suggest that there should be a subcommittee at that point established by PPC in order to keep under review the machinery of government and to carry out the work that had been completed by any such subcommittee. As we all know, there have been a number of changes to our system of government since 1998. The system itself and how it works has been a recurring topic of conversation amongst members, particularly since the ministerial system was introduced. In fact, propositions have been lodged by a number of members to change, amend, or overhaul the system since 2005. During the subcommittee's review, views were varied as to whether the system is right for Jersey or whether improvements to its structure could be made. So there was insufficient time to lodge the necessary legislation to bring forward some of the recommendations of R23 to 2022, published by the subcommittee. As much of the work has been carried out, creating such a committee will enable the next Assembly to assess and bring forward the necessary legislation rather than just carry out another review. The committee could quite neatly work in conjunction with the work that was agreed on Tuesday via Deputy Young's proposition on ministerial responsibilities, as this will not just be for officers or the government to do, but a good cross-section of the Assembly to ensure there is an appropriate check and balance. A standing subcommittee of PPC would ensure a direct avenue is available to members to raise concerns and suggest areas for improvement in each term. Sir, I had no issue with regards to the Council of Ministers amendment, more than I think it's only appropriate. I would expect executive members to be party to that committee anyway, as we've seen with this subcommittee this term. So on that note, sir, I look forward to any questions or comments members may wish to make, and I make the proposition.
Right, is the proposition seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Connie Thompson-Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to say that this proposition and the next one, P65, both of them have my support. They're straightforward as far as I'm concerned and make good sense, not least of which I expect from Senator Valois anyway, and always to the point. Something I can support, sir, and I'd just like to thank her for the work that she has undertaken on this, because it's absolutely paramount that we get that we do things correctly, and I think the monitoring of the arm's length organisations is essential. Are we on the wrong one? Sorry. Beg your pardon, sir. I've got page P65 open in front of me.
Yes.
Beg your pardon. Yeah, yes, I'm supporting that one as well. I am. I'm ahead of myself, sir. Yes. So this is to keep under review the machinery of government, and that's why I mentioned the work that she has carried out on this. Because it took me back when I read that it's 17 years since this has been in operation, and during that time we have attempted to make changes that are beneficial, and I see this as being another one of those, sir. And sorry for jumping ahead there. Maybe I won't speak on P65, sir, but I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak on the proposition, I close the debate and call upon Senator Valois to respond.
Thank you, sir. Very briefly, I'd just like to say thank you to the Constable of St Lawrence for her comments and her kind comments towards the work that we've done as a subcommittee this term. I'd just like to express my thanks to the subcommittee, who was made up of Senator Gorse, Senator Mezek, Constable of St Mary's, Deputy Morale, and myself. It was an interesting group of members, interesting discussions, and hopefully with this committee in the next assembly, they can bring forward the action that's necessary to create the improvements that we request. So, sir, I make the proposition and ask for the appel.
As called for, I invite members to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting and members participating remotely to vote in the chat in the normal way. We can't do that again. I'm sorry, we're in exactly the same position as we were on the last occasion. We're going to have to do an appel nominal, and therefore members remotely, when listen for their names and participate over the microphone when your name is called. And I call for the appel nominal.
Senator Gorst. Senator Farnham.
Poor.
Senator Ferguson.
Poor.
Senator Afondre. Senator Valois.
Poor.
Senator Moore. Senator Pallett.
Poor.
Senator Mezek.
Poor.
The Connétable St Helier.
Poor.
Connétable St Lawrence.
Poor.
Connétable St Brelard.
Poor.
Connétable Grouville. Connétable Trinity.
Poor.
Connétable St Peter.
Poor.
The Connétable St Mary. Connétable St Juan. Connétable St Martin.
Poor.
Connétable St John.
Poor.
The Connétable St Clement. Deputy Martin.
Poor.
Deputy Southern.
Poor.
Deputy Grouville.
Poor.
Deputy Lewis.
Poor.
Deputy Tadier. Deputy Higgins.
Poor.
Deputy Masson. Deputy Pinnell. Deputy Pinnell.
Poor.
Deputy St Martin. Deputy St Juan.
Poor.
Deputy Dublé.
Poor.
Deputy Labby. Deputy Wickenden. Deputy St Mary.
Poor.
Deputy Truscott. Deputy Young.
Poor.
Deputy Ash. Deputy Morel. Deputy Guida.
Poor.
Deputy St Peter. Deputy of Trinity. Deputy of St John. Deputy Lahegara. Deputy Ayer. Deputy Pershard.
Poor.
Deputy Ward.
Poor.
Deputy Owls.
Poor.
Deputy Pamplin.
Poor.
Deputy Gardner.
Deputy Gardner. Thank you. Proposition has been adopted, 39 votes for, no votes contre, no abstentions. The next item of public business is the amendments to standing orders, machinery of government. One moment, I'm on the wrong page. Monitoring of arm's length organisations and green and white papers. It can happen to anyone.
To the best of us, sir.
P65, lodged by the same senator. There's one amendment lodged by the Council of Ministers. Are you accepting that amendment?
I am, sir.
Very well. Do members agree to take the proposition read as amended? Very well. Ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion, A, that a committee comprising executive and non-executive States members should be established in order to monitor the performance of arm's-length organisations and to support responsible ministers and the Assembly in discharging their responsibilities, and to request the Council of Ministers to commission officers to draw up options for this so that a project can be considered by the next States Assembly by no later than the 31st of October 2022. And B, that clear agreed criteria for the preparation of initial consultations on policy or legislative proposals and detailed proposals for legislation should be established, and to request the Chief Minister to commission officers to draw up proposals for this with a view to a report being presented to the States on the outcome of the work by no later than the 30th of September 2022.
Senator.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully this one's as swift as the last. And I thank members for supporting me on the last proposition. There are two parts to this proposition. The first proposes that a committee comprising States members should be established in order to monitor the performance of arm's-length organisations, and the second relates to consultation. So I'll take the first. What was referred to as a supervisory committee is now amended to executive and non-executive members committee. This committee will be required to monitor the performance of arm's-length organisations. I propose this in line with recommendation 7 of PPC's Democratic Accountability and Governance Subcommittee. During the subcommittee's review, a number of views were expressed on the governance arrangements around arm's-length organisations and specified organisations. Many members commented that there is a lack of oversight and a lack of governance and accountability of how they operate. As shareholder at Treasury, for example, and I thank the Treasury Minister for finally publishing the report of the final Memorandum of Understandings for our state-owned companies under R56 2022, it has historically been the case that oversight of MOUs was purely a Treasury function. It is good to see some changes to recognise the need to take account of states' policies and decisions rather than just what the shareholder return is now. Some members called for better governance arrangements to be put in place where the States of Jersey is a shareholder. If this is accepted by the Assembly, the Minister for Treasury and Resources would commission officers to draw up options for the establishment of this committee so that action can be taken by the next Assembly. The second part of the proposition is with regards to consultation. I did refer to it in the original proposition as green and white papers. I'm not going to argue over words, what we call them or what we don't call them, but this sits fairly well with a previous proposition we debated, sir, on the engagement code with scrutiny, because if there's better organisation around how consultation and how policy development is done, then the way that scrutiny works with the government can speed some of the requirements up around certain propositions, whether that's legislation or whether that's policy. So the second part of the proposition calls for the creation of a clear, agreed criteria for the preparation of what I refer to as green and white papers, which is in line with the recommendation 24 of the subcommittee. It's acknowledged that legislative scrutiny has improved in recent years to become a routine part of scrutiny work, but there was a collective view from members during the subcommittee's review that it's still held back by a lack of time and resources. At the time, the subcommittee recalled that the former Comptroller and Auditor General had suggested that clear principles for the preparation of green and white papers should be established in order to trigger the timely review of scrutiny panels in advance of preparation of draft legislation. This, I hope, would assist with the Code of Engagement that was only agreed by this Assembly on Tuesday with regards to the policy pipeline and legislation around priorities and timelines. If this is accepted, the Chief Minister would commission officers to draw up proposals for criteria on how consultation, hopefully taking into account scrutiny, will work with a view to presenting a report to the states on the outcome of the work. I'm happy to answer any questions about these proposals at the end of the debate, and I'm prepared, if necessary, to take votes separately on each paragraph. Sir, I make the proposition.
Branch, is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Before we proceed to the debate, we're going to have a brief pause because the greffier designate will need to switch off the machine and turn it on again so we can go back to our voting system. And during that period, no one will be able to be heard over the microphone. So for a period of uncharacteristic silence, if we could sit here whilst that exercise takes place. Yes, is it switched on?
So does that also require those who are operating remotely to come out and then come back in again?
No, it's not necessary if you're participating remotely to come out. It's purely the internal system, Deputy Higgins. Right. What we're going to do is would everyone press their voting buttons as if voting, and we're just going to work out if it's working all right. Yes. It's quite funny because a number of people have voted against that, but.
So could we have the names, please?
Thank you very much. In which case, if we cancel that vote, and then we will proceed as normal. Senator Moore, you wish to speak.
Thank you, sir. And I don't want to prolong the debate. I simply want to speak in favour of Senator Valois' very pragmatic follow-up on her excellent report and the work of the Democratic Accountability Subcommittee. The Minister will be greatly missed by myself. She has brought to her role a great eye for detail and what should absolutely be required from each and every one of us, but she has it in spades an ability to provide excellent oversight and a commitment to governance, which is exemplary, and good governance, of course, at that. So these are, in my view, very simple, straightforward, but also much needed measures. And perhaps we could even go further and to consider in the future extending the Oversight Committee to consider the oversight of all bodies that are subject to service level agreements, because in my work it has become apparent at times that not all of those bodies and their service level agreements are monitored sufficiently as time progresses. And I think the public would benefit greatly if there was greater and more diligent oversight of them. This, of course, is a very inclusive suggestion, and I hope that it will bring members of a future Assembly together and encourage greater focus on the delivery of and performance for the public. The matter of consultation has been one that has caused, it's been raised many times by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel during this Assembly and its life. We have struggled many times and included on many occasions the recommendation that there should be a greater process and thought given to consultation of certain items. And I think that Senator Valois' proposition will certainly help guide members of the government to ensure that they do not conduct consultations on major changes in too quick a time frame, and also that they do not conduct them over the summer period, which, although they are in their own guidelines, sadly this government have had a tendency to avoid them. So I applaud Senator Valois for her efforts and I'm very happy to support them.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Bishop.
Thank you, sir. I will be supporting this amended proposition, and I thank the Senator for accepting the Council of Ministers amendment. However, I just want to address some of the points the Senator has asserted in the report accompanying her position. The Senator uses the terms arm's-length organisations and specified organisations liberally in her report, but then states that members expressed the view that better governance arrangements should be put in place for the relevant ALOs and SOs where the States of Jersey is a shareholder. That phrase narrows the focus of this proposition down to the 5 states wholly owned entities and 2 majority owned entities. The dozens of other arm's-length organisations and states specified organisations do not have the States of Jersey as shareholder. I'm certain that was not the intention of the Senator, sir, but again, when using the Guernsey Trading Supervisory Board as an example, references that this board carries out the state's role as shareholder. Perhaps in the Senator summing up, she could confirm that her intention is to include all the ALOs, not just those that have the states as a shareholder, which would limit the effect to just 7 entities. Also want to come back to the reference in the report to an alleged lack of oversight, governance and accountability as to how the ALOs operate. Specifically, I want to address the mischaracterization that the 7 state-owned entities operate with a lack of oversight. Pursuant to the Public Finances Jersey law, responsibility for these state-owned entities is delegated to me to represent the states of Jersey as shareholder. My relationship with the wholly owned SOEs is governed by detailed memoranda of understanding. Returning to the umbrella terms of ALOs and specified organisations, I would note that there are already groups, committees in place that have been formed to provide oversight to the wider ALO family, including the grant-funded bodies. In many instances, these groups were formed in response to recommendations of the Comptroller and Auditor General. A prime example of this is the Arm's Length Bodies Oversight Board, ALBOB. ALBOB was specifically formed to do what its name suggests, to provide oversight to the ALOs. Whilst admittedly, membership of ALBOB is the CEO, Director Generals and other civil servants, it does report on its work and makes recommendations to the Council of Ministers. There are other policy groups, such as the Digital Policy Unit and the Housing Minister's new housing groups. Further, the Regeneration Steering Group provides additional oversight to SOJDC on its regeneration and development activities. So, sir, whilst I urge members to vote in favour of the amended proposition, I would stress that much of the groundwork has already been done. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Connie Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I found the words of the Treasury Minister very helpful there. The only comment I have on this, sir, is that in accepting the amendment, the proposition now has lost the term supervisory, so it is no longer a supervisory committee, but gained the words to support responsible ministers. And in my view, whilst the new committee would presumably be supporting the responsible ministers, my understanding of the way I read the original proposition was that this new committee would be there to, it certainly says, to monitor. So if they are monitoring for good governance, they must be asking questions. They must be questioning the way things are done, looking closely at whether things are being done not only correctly, but whether they can be improved. So when I read the word support, I believe that that is probably what will happen, but I would certainly hope that when the Senator sums up, she will give her view of what that amendment actually would mean in relation to the new committee, because you cannot support unconditionally. You can support conditionally when you are able to make recommendations for change, for improvement. And indeed, having said that, you could be supporting the responsible ministers by saying, hold on, you're totally wrong, or this is being done completely incorrectly, stop. And that is really the way I would view this committee, not as a support by means of agreeing all the time with the responsible minister. And I'm sure that that is probably what the how the Senator views this. And of course, when the options have been drawn up and the next States Assembly looks at them, which will be no later than 31st of October, they will need to look at them closely to ensure that it is not just an unconditional, we agree with the minister situation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can I Deputy Young?
Well, thank you, sir. I think this is a very very far-thinking and an excellent proposal to, I think, help future governments to do what I would call joining up the dots. I think we have rather, in recent years, I think, adopted a very much of devolved style of government where we create bodies and we hand over new powers and responsibility to them. And understandably, those bodies, when that happens, they are generally full of enthusiasm and go in the direction they wish to go. Oh, sorry, sir. I'll start again. A very pragmatic proposal which will help government join up the dots because we have in recent years set in place a lot of arm's length structures to, if you like, devolve all sorts of important functions that we want done. But of course those bodies, when they're organised, obviously present major challenges how we coordinate that work together linked into overall government policies. And I think the work of the subcommittee has identified that there does need to be improvements in this area. And I think they've adopted the model here, or based on what Guernsey does, our sister island. It isn't perfect. And I accept the debate over the use of supervision. And I think the Connétable is right to raise this question. Connétable St Lawrence is right to raise this issue about how this new committee is going to be. I think I'm relying on the words that it says to monitor the performance. And I don't think that should imply a passive sort of role, you know, that just says, well, look, here's body X that says they're going to do this. Well, you know, I'm hoping this body wouldn't just look and say, well, how well or poorly did you do this? But was it the right thing? You know, because there are lots of examples where things are done very well, but they're the wrong thing. And so I think this is done. I think the other element of this, which I think is extremely important, the proposal, because it includes both non-executive and executive members now with the amendment, will help, I think, improve this link about scrutiny or backbench members, which I think is about greater inclusion, to give those members access through. Because although I accept what the Treasury Minister is saying, that there is accountability in the current arrangements, I personally don't think, and this is not a criticism, it's an observation, I don't think it's easily accessible to all members. And I think one of the questions that I would like to hear from the Senator on this is whether or not it's proposed that this body will, if you like, in its proceedings, will be open to a wider audience to be able to see what sort of dialogue goes on that interaction. Because I think it's probably inevitable that it won't be down at the kind of the fine detail of these operating. It will be, my expectation it will be at the very kind of top level of what is this organisation trying to do and what are its priorities and what is its goals. And I think there will need to be interactions with the ministers involved. And I think there is another question I'd like to hear from the Senator. The paper makes reference to MOUs, memorandums of understandings, which up to now, I think each of these bodies, I'm not sure if they've all got them, but obviously these set the rules for, if you like, the way the body operates. And if we take an example, it's only an example, and I'm not, raising any issue with a particular body, but I'm using an example. SOJDC has an example of a memorandum of an agreement, and of course in that case, that memorandum of agreement was actually embodied in the state's proposition. So I'd like to hear what the mechanics being proposed for this subcommittee are to be able to ensure that they can input and they're not faced with a situation, well, sorry, we can't alter this, there's no effect, we can't do any change because it's already stuck in the state's decision. So I think the formulation of amendments and changes to the MOUs of those bodies that are necessary, what is the mechanics of doing that is a really important thing going forward. So I think it is going to be a really, a major task, and I'd like to hope that, or if it's not an open body, that we get regular, I say we, the public, because it won't be me, I won't be in the Assembly, the public get regular reports on the work of this subcommittee. And so I think it really is important. It's a very, very, it's a big step forward. So I congratulate the subcommittee and the Senator in bringing this. I hope I'm not scaring off too many ministers who maybe fear this. No, I'm not getting these shaking heads. Now, the other thing on the green and white papers, I think yesterday when I used the phrase about, and I think this is something which should be thought about on the second part of the proposition, about how we develop policy proposals. I think I'd like to see some rules on spreadsheets, rules by spreadsheets. Sorry, not spreadsheet, PowerPoints. I wish I had a penny for every PowerPoint presentation I've seen in the last 4 years. And I wonder what happens to these, because what happens, we get, a 100-page paper, or maybe more, 1,000-page papers at times, and then you get a really succinct PowerPoint presentation that gives you the guts of it, what this is about. And that's that we've made a lot of use of that, and it's been pretty handy during remote participation, because it's easier, just bung up a spreadsheet, have a meeting, talk about it. So I'd like to think that this group will start to have a think about how accessible some of this work is to the public. Because the whole point of green papers, my memory based on governments elsewhere, it's a public process. You publish a policy document and you put it out there and you take the views, you wait and see what reaction you get. And then, if you get a bad reaction, it doesn't go anywhere. That's the end of the day, you come back with another one. But if it generally finds good grounds, then you work up the proposal into a detailed proposal, the mechanics of it into a white paper. There's a lot of advantages about that, because it means you don't waste a lot of money doing detailed proposals that are just going to fall flat. So it's really efficient way of doing it. So I'm hoping that, perhaps I'm going too far here, because I'm kind of almost getting into the role of thinking how this committee might work. But I'd like Senator Valwa just to comment a bit about any thoughts that the Senator has on that. But I think it's a really good move, and I hope members on both sides will not only see its importance, but I'm sure they do, but embrace the intention, which is to really try and join up. And I think I certainly interpret it arm's length organisation as what it says, where we've effectively devolved a function where we need that body to be able to coordinate and link in to what the political priorities are after the election and set by members of this Assembly. So thank you, I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you very much. Mr Attorney, did you wish to proffer advice to the Assembly?
Yes, just briefly before the Senator responds and sums up, is on this question of the removal of the word supervisory, which is raised by the Constable of St Lawrence and also has been touched on by Deputy Young just a moment ago. So I just wish to offer the advice that the removal of the word supervisory is an important one, because the word supervisory is close to direction, and it is important in my advice that there is a distinction between monitoring and direction in the case of arm's length organisations. And so I hope that advice is of assistance to members generally and to Senator Vanblaar in her summing up. Thank you.
Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I'll try and be brief. I have to speak, but I will support, because I know I didn't support yesterday, but I can't let this go. This is absolutely applaud Senator Valwa and Deputy Young for the work they've done, and they've said they're not standing again, they won't be here next time. And in the last sitting of the Assembly, I think this is the third new committee, sir, that we're setting up for the next time. Don't remember any more states members being around next time. Who's supporting all these committees? This being so, while we're all moving the department to align up in direct parallel with the minister, because that's what we agreed to, sir. It's all going to be happening in the first 6 months. I go back also, sir, to the diversity report from the forum, which was chaired by Deputy Doublé. It may be 18 months old, I think, but my memory is still good enough to know it says on every panel, every scrutiny panel, every other panel, there must be, and also ministers, assistant ministers, there must be an X amount of women. In fact, there was too many women that there is even in the Assembly. And I just say, well done, but it shouldn't be now. This should not be doing the last day of the last debate, practically in the last day this Assembly sits, to making sure that people who are elected, who want to be re-elected, are going to be absolutely just finding out how many panels are going to sit on, going for ministries. Hopefully, you know, we've got more experienced people now who can go for ministries, will go for ministries. But we're just saying, just another committee. Oversight, it will be ministers and it will be non-ministers, it will be half and half. Again, it needs support, sir. I'm hoping behind the scenes someone's thinking about this. Who's supporting this new committee? With, you know, just even supplying the papers, taking the minutes, you know, the practical things that have to be done. So, yeah, I mean, I was the only one who voted against Deputy Young, and I can't be childless and vote against Senator Barber because it is our last debate, and we've had an amendment, so it must all be right. I still have absolute grave concerns that we don't know what we're doing in the last days of the Assembly for the new people coming in. But there's my warning, but I will support grudgingly. Thank you, sir.
You, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy of Grouville.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to applaud Deputy Valois, Senator Valois for bringing this forward, because I have long held the view that we need to play more of a part than just banking the annual dividend check. I know it might not be like that in practice, but sometimes that is the impression that we can have. Now, based on what the Attorney General was saying, the sort of difference between monitoring and supervisory, we set up these ALOs, these quangos, whatever you like to call them, we set them up to have focus, to get on with a specific job, to employ people in their field on a full-time basis, focused at a particular area on that ALO. Now, there is a bit of a disconnect, actually, and never more so that it came to my attention when I was challenging the Jersey electricity standby charge. And I brought a proposition to this Assembly to have quite a few things looked at. And it came to my attention that we were operating with 1933 electricity laws. Our electricity laws had not been updated since 1933. So you can imagine how out of date they were. So I think this has got to be a two-way process. It's surely we've got to listen to the ALOs about how we can improve our laws, but also we have priorities, and I would like to know how our priorities have got to align with the ALOs that we're setting up. Maybe it is through a memorandum of understanding, but there has got to be some alignment. We want to do renewable energy, so clearly the Jersey electricity laws 1933 aren't going to deliver that. So we need to make changes in that respect, but I want to know that if the states of Jersey decide something and want to pursue something like renewable energy, tidal, wind, solar, whatever, how our strategic aims are going to align with, and I know I'm picking on Jersey Electricity here because I have more knowledge of them than the other utilities, how our priorities are going to align with theirs and vice versa. Because at the moment, as far as I'm concerned, there is a disconnect and we need to get that connection right. So it is, you know, do we get accused of interfering in the business of the ALO? I just want to know where the boundaries are between the monitoring and the supervisory and how much we can influence them to go in a certain direction and then let them get on and do it and then monitor it. So I'd just like Senator Valois to clarify that when she sums up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I'd say thank you to the Senator for bringing us, and I'd also like to say thank you to the Senator I've worked with on the panel, and to say thank you for her work on the panel, because there have been so many times when it's been essential to have her there to make the panel work, really, and for the thoroughness of her work. It's been, I think that needs to be recognised, and I'd like to do that publicly. In terms of this proposition, there's a couple of things I need to ask. Whenever I see establish anything from government, a committee, a panel, of a particular issue, political oversight groups, I think when and I thought about this, when the options are drawn up, there needs to be real clarity on how members are going to be chosen. The constituencies in terms of 2 ministers and 2 non-ministerial people is fine, but we have to get away from the same people all the time, or those people who are, you know, friends of being on these panels. They need to be truly reflective across the Assembly. And I think that's very important if you're going to have these types of things going on. Second, in terms of the papers, I think that's a good idea. I think initial consultations and that is the part of scrutiny that we've been missing at times, that time span. And we need to perhaps write in time frames that already exist. So there's not actually a huge amount of work to be done there. A lot of that does exist, so that, you know, that legislative scrutiny that's easy to say. It always happens, so that's really important. But I think the membership of any board needs to be clear as to why it's there if people are going to have faith in its actions. So I just want to say that briefly before we vote on this. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And I too congratulate Senator Valois for bringing this proposition. Dealing first with the MOUs, that's long been a source of my concern that the original versions were not as full as they might be in various directions. In that connection, I can advise that in relation to that concerning Ports of Jersey, which comes within the domain of the Economic National Affairs Panel, we did meet with the Ports of Jersey representatives and indeed with the Minister and her advisors, and we had the discussion on the MOU there. Without wishing to go off piece, as it were, I still am concerned that the original MOU, which requires that any replacement come before the Assembly, well, that has yet been fulfilled, but that is not for now. But we were duly satisfied that the MOU in relation to financial matters was an improvement on the original, but it is to be noted that the MOU is between the Treasury Minister and the body concerned, and of necessity it concentrates on matters financial. With various bodies, there are other aspects to be considered, what I might call the softer side. Ports of Jersey, for instance, they have responsibilities in relation to sporting clubs that might use their facilities, and I'm not convinced that they are as well set out as they might be, and that might well extend to other MOUs as well. In a previous Assembly, I commented on the fact that in the MOU with Andy Holmes, the word environment environment did not appear once, and there are considerations which need to be brought into, which need to be considered in addition to the pure financial ones. And I do see this proposal as perhaps filling a gap which may not exist at the moment. In relation to the one on Ports of Jersey, I do note that in the original version, and I thank the Minister for changing this, did refer to, let me start again, sir. In the original MOU, the present MOU, there was reference to a policy group of ministers. That was replaced by a term policy leads, and in the version put to us, the draft version put to us, policy leads was able to include officers. I'm pleased to say that the Minister acceded to our request that we should actually confine that to ministers, because I was concerned that ministerial responsibility should be just that. So I'm pleased that that has been recognised. Also in relation to various companies, I do have concerns that there are overlapping considerations which cannot be met by the MOU itself. I'm thinking particularly in relation to property. Each of Andium Homes, St. Jersey Development Company and Ports of Jersey have interests in that direction, and they need to liaise. There needs to be oversight, and it may already be fulfilled by other protocols or documentation. That is certainly an aspect which I believe needs to be fully addressed, and I see this this new committee as being able to fulfil that. And as to the committee itself, it does need to be approved. Its constitution needs to be approved by the Assembly itself. At the moment, we have various supervisory boards or advisory boards, and frequently the board members are those nominated by the Minister. That means that the Assembly as a whole doesn't necessarily know who is on that, but I suggest that that board would have much more teeth if it was the Assembly itself who nominated the members as they approved members, as much as they do with scrutiny panels, and I hope that will be borne in mind when the time comes. And finally, on the second section of the Deputy's proposition, yes, it is the case that in efficient running of a scrutiny panel, the panel receives a draft proposition well in advance of actual lodging, and in those cases, the exercise by scrutiny is often more successful. It cannot be right that on the last day for lodging, that is the first occasion that the scrutiny panel receives notice of it. So I do welcome the suggestion that the idea of white and green papers will ensure that panels have advance notice, and we can perhaps thrash out, in other than a conflicting way, some of the aspects which need to be changed, and that will be putting scrutiny to its proper use. So again, sir, I congratulate the Centre for bringing this proposition, and I shall be supporting it. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Collins Harbison, John.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to start by supporting the Deputy of St Mary's view in terms of the selection of this body should be done here through this Assembly. If I can just pick up on what the Treasury Minister said, there are several lists of arms length organisations, including a number of them that aren't based in Jersey. For example, I'm surprised to read that Super League Triathlon is an arm's length organisation with offices in Singapore and London. I think the proposal will, I believe, help P75 because that idea is to pull things together and set the policy and direction. Well, I'd ask the proposer if she knows whether the organisation's Articles of Association will allow for this. I'm not sure if at least one of the arm's length organisations might be a private members club. The Treasury Minister also spoke about existing bodies, and I'm sure we don't want to duplicate things, we want to make things more efficient. So I look forward to hearing about that. Deputy Young spoke about his hopes for openness. Well, clearly there's going to be a lot of commercial sensitivity around some of the subjects that are discussed. So that may not be possible. And he also said he hopes it wouldn't be passive. But as the AG says, the body may not have the ability to direct, they'll have the ability to monitor. So I'm aware recently of one state-owned body who's divested their interest in a technology company. I was very surprised at that, and I'm not talking about the Internet of Things from JT, because if we read P75, it's about utilising our arm's length organisations to get involved in technology, to use them as incubators. And here we had an investment that could and was doing that. In a previous life, I was chair of Jersey Business, and I can tell you that we tried without success to get the arm's length organisations to work more closely together. There is so much duplication, HR, IT, finance, buildings, and we could get the island's money working much harder for us if we actually worked more closely together. So I'm happy to support the Senator's proposal, but I wonder if she could just answer those questions. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Conor Gubb. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon the Senator to respond.
Sir, could I just ask, are we quorate at the moment?
If we count the ones who are participating remotely, I will do a quorum call if you wish me to, but it seems to me that we probably are all right at this point. Senator.
Thank you, sir. And I'm really grateful for everybody who contributed to the debate. Lots of questions, lots of comments, as would have been expected, I believe, following the work that we did as a subcommittee. I will start, if I may, with Deputy Martin. If Deputy Martin does not want to set up any more committees or boards or oversight groups or anything like that, then don't support the proposition. It's as simple as that. But what I'm trying to do here is that there is an issue whereby, and the Treasury Minister referred to, I hate using acronyms, but I'm going to do it, ALBOB. And it's made up of officers. And that's all well and good. And it, you know, we've got some very capable, very diligent, very, you know, trustworthy officers who can lead us and support us, and particularly advise us in technical areas as well, even more so. But that's officers, sir. And what I'm trying to say here is there is a political need to have that oversight. These are bodies that have been created that used to come under the power of this States Assembly. And they've been moved out, some for very good reasons, some I would argue not. But, you know, we all have our own opinions of that. We are where we are with arm's length organisations and states-owned bodies. But, sir, I think it's fair to say, as a minister, as one minister with the types of portfolios that ministers have, to have the time to read through every detail of MOUs or articles of association or every strategic business plan that those ALOs submit or every financial report and accounts. I know that officers are more likely to actually go through those finer details, but actually our responsibility, if we look at the MOUs, which I'm grateful for the recent publication of the new MOUs, because there's things on there, like, for example, the state's decision for FOIs. That's been recognised in the MOU, finally. And I would argue that there is this... So I'm grateful for the Attorney General mentioning the supervisory being a direction and this being about monitoring. So this is a first step, I think, for the next Assembly to make sure that there is some formal political oversight. I know the direction will be at the behest of the Minister, but actually, if you look at the MOU for Andium, the Minister is referred to the guarantor, and it's the States Assembly that is recognised under their MOU. I've just recently read it this week as it was published. I've got particularly interested in the MOU of Andium and the way that it's functioned over the years because of previous debates. And so ultimately the States Assembly are the ones that created these bodies. We're the ones that create the legislation. We are the ones that are elected by the public who expect our tax-paying money and the dividends from those companies to ensure value for money. And I'm sure everyone's got a different version of what value for money is, but that doesn't just mean doing things on the cheap. And the intention of this was, and I think if we look at over this term in particular, we've had policy development boards, political oversight groups, a number of other different varying people being pulled into different directions. And the policy development boards were heavily criticised, actually, in our work that we did when we were interacting with current states members. And it was mentioned during the workshops that we had last July around their concerns about how they function and what it means for the Chief Minister to ensure that it's his terms of reference. And I know Deputy Masson, who was my assistant minister when I was minister, we worked on trying to create a better terms of reference. But we are where we are, like I said. But this will require officers to draw up options so that a proposition can be brought back to this assembly. So questions like from Deputy Ward about that membership. Well, if there's a requirement that there's an open or appointment of a membership, make sure it's in the proposition, make sure that that's in that proposition. And so it's good to have this discussion because officers are able to take into account what we are discussing in this assembly and draw up those options, listening to what people expect of what this committee will do and how it will function. I will specifically answer the questions that were asked of me, so sorry if I miss anybody out, flag me if I do. So the Treasury Minister referred to the fact that I was referencing just the MOUs and just the states-owned companies. I would refer the Treasury Minister to page 29 of R23 2022, which actually provides the list and the information that sits around the purpose for me bringing forward this proposition and shows what we mean by arm's length organisations and specified organisations. So I hope that clarifies for the Minister, but I was just trying to use it as an example. So the Constable of St Lawrence asked about hoping it wasn't, I suppose, like the Constable of St John's referred to, a boys' club or boys' club, because it is important to have that challenge. And actually, when you have different points of view sitting around a table, you're more likely to create better policy and better legislation, and you're not always going to agree on everything, but that's why there's sometimes compromise has to be made. And like I've mentioned, ministers have a great deal on their table. You know, these portfolios are pretty huge, and the amount of paperwork that's being put in front of them on a daily basis, expecting them to have oversight, particularly of these types of companies, and the expectation that the ALOs that we have are carrying out the expectations, not just of this Assembly, but the ministers that have been elected by this Assembly to ensure we fulfil our strategic priorities, which was mentioned, I believe, by the Deputy of Grouville. So yes, the Constable of St Lawrence, I would expect there to be challenge. And that moves neatly on to Deputy Young around whether there could be openness and transparency. There could, if they want it. I'm not against it. But the point is here is that it's that memorandum of understanding and the service level agreements. Any of those that have been written have been agreed and signed off between the minister and the relevant body. And so what I would expect to see happening in this kind of committee, this is just what I'd expect to see happening. I don't know whether it will happen, but there would be that challenge and how that MOU would work or how that SLA would work and what the inclusion of those types of policies would be. So if you have an MOU or an SLA with regards to, I'll refer to Jersey Electricity as an example because Deputy Grouville mentioned it. We have a huge piece of work on carbon neutral and all of those green initiatives that so many members want to make sure are carried out. isn't it better to be able to sit around the table and make sure that the expectations, or when the strategic business plan is published, or their policies of what they're going to do as an electricity company, that there is a challenge to that says, well, hang on, Jersey Electricity, we have an expectation of carrying out this, this and this, and instead of having to have a big to and fro in the Assembly about who's right and who's wrong, having that challenging conversation about what the MOU means, and actually making sure things like key performance indicators or measuring that performance is having that challenge. And it's down to ultimately the ministers to make that decision. But there's nothing stopping a member bringing a proposition to this Assembly and directing the minister. That's what this Assembly is for, and that's why it's useful to have that mix of executive and non-executive members on that committee, because sometimes things do fall through the cracks and sometimes there cannot be agreement on something. But if you feel it's absolutely in the public interest to do so, this Assembly ultimately holds that power. And I totally agree with Deputy Young on the death by PowerPoint. In the Constable of St John's referred to whether they would meet the requirements of the Articles of Association. I have to admit to him, I haven't read every single Articles of Association. I've had a great deal of work on my plate. But like I've mentioned before, I believe States of Jersey Development Company, which I thoroughly scrutinised back in 2010, when it was Webb, became States of Jersey Development Company, and we had MOUs and Articles of Association and all the amount of work for it, it was agreed by this Assembly. If there is an issue in the Articles of Association, then maybe that's something that has to be discussed at the very first meeting of the committee when it's created. And how do we go about this? How do we move forward and improve that situation? That's what I would suggest this could do. And hopefully that people will be listened to and that would be brought forward to amend. Just trying to make sure I'm covering everybody's questions. I'll go back to Deputy Martin. I know it shouldn't be the last sitting, but I was trying to be as kind as I possibly can, because it's frustrated me doing this work. This is the third review I've done of machinery of government. And we worked so hard and tried to include so many people's points of view about how we can improve our system. And time again, the wall was put up to us meeting with the Council of Ministers or the Chief Minister to make sure that what we were recommending was practical, that we could actually do the job properly, that we could improve it the way that was expected of those people who took part in the conversations with us. I only managed to get in to meet the Council of Ministers when I threatened to lodge the report. And that was on the 15th of February. I mean, I'm really sorry, Deputy Martin, that it came at the last sitting. I actually would have liked to bring all the amendments to the legislation, particularly with regards to the States Employment Board, but the law drafters have been working tirelessly to support this Assembly, again at the end of a state's term, whereby everything gets rushed through and not proper consideration, especially on what is concerning of legislation, and that really does concern me. Deputy Grouville, and I understand Deputy Grouville standing again, and I have mentioned her, the electricity in regards to her speech and the need for alignment, and I totally agree that need for alignment, it shouldn't just be about the financial return. It has to be recognising what we can do together as the arm's length companies and as the states to meet the needs of the public. I think this, for me, it's a stepping stone. I have mentioned the proposition, there is a need for a proposition to come back to, I think, encompass and recognise the comments that members have made today. And so I would argue that initially we would be monitoring the performance through the MOUs, through the SLAs, looking at the strategic business plans, making sure they align with the States Assembly and the Minister's strategic aims in the Common Strategic Policy or the government plans that are in place, to make sure that we can actually achieve outcomes. No more reviews, please. And so if there is a need to go one step further, then I would possibly suggest that that might be a step to take, but that's for this Assembly. Because the work, when we were looking as a committee at the Supervisory Committee in Guernsey and the way that does or doesn't work, of course they don't have the ministerial government structure that we do, but the work that we were looking at, and the issue with ministerial government is it's not inclusive. I hate to break that to people, but it's not. It does create, unfortunately, a them and us, because it's made for political parties. And we don't have that structure like other jurisdictions do. So we have to make do with what we have, but actually improve it in the best way we possibly can on behalf of the public. And so I think it's a stepping stone. And if the Deputy Grouville wants to take it a little bit further, and she's back within the chamber next term, I'd suggest watch out for the proposition that's brought forward. And maybe there is a need for an amendment to that if she doesn't feel it's strong enough to ensure that alignment. But I'm hoping that that will be recognised when the proposition is being brought forward. I'm just watching time, so very, very quickly. I'm really grateful for the Deputy of St Mary and the reference he made to Ports of Jersey. And yes, absolutely, property definitely does need better oversight. I would absolutely agree with that. The final thing I will say, because there was mention of the consultation, the green paper and white papers. I mean, we have tried and tested these methods before. I have referred to it in a previous debate around the property tax review. That was a green and white paper presentation. But what we mean by having a criteria is ensuring that there is consistency. And the issue with consultation at the moment, and we find it when we're discussing in scrutiny, has this been consulted on? If it hasn't been consulted with the wider public, who are the stakeholders? What have they actually said? You know, having that feedback, instead of scrutiny having to do the second load of consultation, you know, try to be more efficient with our time. Try to be a bit more productive with our time. And that's the point of having the criteria, because it allows us to organise our time better, but actually be more efficient and hopefully more productive. That's why we ask for the second part, sir. So I make the proposition, I ask for members' support, and I'm really grateful for everyone's contribution, and I ask for the appel.
As called for, I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members participating remotely to vote in the normal way. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, ask the greffier to close the voting.
Sir, I hate to say this, I'm having problems with my computer, and I'm obviously too late for this, but I'd like it on record. It's Deputy Higgins I would have been voting for. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Very well. The proposition has been adopted. 39 votes pour, 1 vote contre.
Could I...
The one, please. Wasn't me.
The one vote is called for, I think.
Deputy Labby voted contre.
Very well. The adjournment is called for. Can I remind members the adjournment is of a shortened period. We've agreed to come back at 1:45, I believe. So a very short hour for luncheon. Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until that time.